Chapter 3599. Chapter 3594. The Last Laugh. In the blink of an eye, the Netherworld Emperor was covered in blood. His face was covered in bloody wounds. He looked terrifying. He roared at the sky and let out a heart-wrenching scream. Nietion frowned. His expression was ugly. He could feel a terrifying killing intent surging inside the Netherworld Emperor's body. It was like a wild beast that threatened to crush his limbs and meridians. It was hard to imagine what kind of pain the Netherworld Emperor was enduring right now. Netherworld Emperor, scream all you want. The louder you scream, the happier and more enjoyable I will be. Lian Jiofeng smiled cold and said, "Do you know that when 7 kills activates extreme kill soul killing, the pain he is enduring is even more terrifying than what you are experiencing right now?" Lian Jiofeng, this emperor will kill you. The Netherworld Emperor roared. Like a beast bathed in blood, he suddenly took a step forward and charged at Lian Jiofeng. But his body froze after he charged dozens of meters. His body trembled and he spat out blood. The power of extreme kill soul killing was so terrifying that it almost tore his body to pieces. Damn it! The Netherworld Emperor roared. His eyes were vicious, and his body surged with a violent aura of blood. Even you, the Emperor of the Netherworld, will not be able to withstand the extreme killing soul reaping. Lian Jiofeng smiled cold. Seeing the Netherworld Emperor endure such pain gave him a perverted sense of satisfaction. Extreme kill soul killing was 7 kills bloodline killing move. He used his own bloodline as a guide and merged the soul killing move into his bloodline. This was a bloodline taboo move. Before killing others, he would first kill himself. 7 kills had sacrificed himself to take the Netherworld Emperor down with him. When 7 kills was chosen as a sacrifice, he knew that he would not be able to escape death. That was why he worked with Lian Jiofeng to use extreme kill soul killing. When the Netherworld Emperor absorbed 7 kills bloodline power and activated the great sacrificial formation of Heaven Punishing 9, he had dug his own grave. Lian Jiofeng had predicted everything, arranged everything, and witnessed everything. He wanted to watch the Netherworld Emperor die slowly in front of him. Emperor of the Underworld, the taste of extreme killing soul reaping must be very unpleasant, right? Lian Jiofeng said cold. His eyes shone with a sinister light. He looked like a man-eating beast. Lian Jiofeng, I never thought that I'd be defeated by you after dominating the world. The Underworld Emperor endured the excruciating pain and roared like a wild beast. Even if this emperor has to die today, I will kill all of you. Boom! His body shook the moment he finished speaking, and a terrifying aura surged into the air. Immediately, the stench of blood spread out and crashed towards Lian Jiofeng like a tidal wave. Nietion. Lian Jiofeng's eyes trembled when he sensed the killing intent. He cried out. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. Without hesitation, he took a step forward and slashed down with his sword. A huge sword shadow fell like a mountain and forcefully blocked the monstrous blood chi. Bang! Then, there was a muffled sound, and the Netherworld Emperor was forced several steps back. He vomited a mouthful of blood and trembled. He could barely stand. He could not unleash his full strength under the pressure of extreme, killing soul reaping. It was very difficult for him to fight against Nietion. Lian Jiofeng, give me a reason to save you. Nietion steadied himself and looked cold at Lian Jiofeng. He could just watch from the sidelines and let the Netherworld Emperor and Lian Jiofeng kill each other. I know how to recover Cher's memories, Lian Jiofeng said solemnly, his eyes trembling slightly. He never thought that the Netherworld Emperor could still erupt with such terrifying power after being hit by extreme, killing soul reaping. That counts as a reason. The corner of Nietion's lips twitched. Then, his eyes turned cold and murderous. He looked at the Netherworld Emperor and said, "Then there is no need for you to live anymore. You think you can kill this emperor? What joke." The Netherworld Emperor looked at Nietion and smiled cold. He said, "You are just an ant. This emperor can kill you as easily as turning over my hand. You are still so arrogant, even in the face of death. As expected of the Netherworld Emperor, Nie Tianling smiled coldly, killing intent surging in his eyes. The Netherworld Emperor smiled cold and said, "This Emperor will not die like this." Boom! In the next moment, he attacked directly and slapped out angrily. Immediately, a giant bloody hand appeared and enveloped Nietian. Nietian's eyebrows furrowed as his expression flickered. In the next moment, he slashed out with his sword. Sword shadows whizzed out like raging dragons. Bang! The two powers collided, and space shook as if it was about to collapse. Nietian's figure retreated. While he was still in midair, he vomited a mouthful of blood. He only managed to stabilize himself after retreating several hundred meters. His face had turned even paler. The extreme killing soul-slaying technique is terrifying, but it is not unbreakable. At this moment, the Netherworld Emperor roared. Then, waves of terrifying heaven-punishing demonic energy surged from his body. Demonic energy surged into the sky and roiled violently. It was as if it was going to devour the world. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He did not know what the Netherworld Emperor was planning. "Are you?" Lian Jiufeng's eyes trembled as if he had realized something. He paused for a moment and exclaimed, "Are you going to forcefully strip the heaven-punishing demon heart?" "Lian Jiufeng, you're not that stupid after all." The Netherworld Emperor smiled cold and said, "It is true that you have exceeded my expectations by unsealing the memories of 3 lifetimes. But who will win this battle, and who will have the last laugh, is yet to be determined." Boom! The heaven-punishing demon energy around the Netherworld Emperor became abnormally violent when he finished speaking. He was like an abyss of demonic energy as he unleashed terrifying demonic energy. He was going to strip the heaven-punishing demon heart from his body and use it to break the extreme killing soul-slaying technique. The extreme killing soul-slaying technique was hidden inside the heaven-punishing demon heart. If he could strip the heaven-punishing demon heart, he might have a chance to live. "Nietian, stop him." Lian Jiufeng's eyes trembled as he shouted like he had gone mad. Nietian frowned, and his expression changed slightly. He tried to take a step forward, but he was struck by the powerful demonic energy and was unable to take another step forward. The heaven-punishing demon energy around the Netherworld Emperor was too terrifying. He could not get close to him at all. Moreover, Nietian had reached the limits of his martial body. He did not have much power left. "Nietian, what are you waiting for? Kill him now." Lian Jiufeng looked at the Netherworld Emperor in shock and shouted. The Netherworld Emperor only had one chance left. It would be terrible if he was allowed to strip the heaven-punishing demon heart. "Shut up." Nietian abruptly turned around. His eyes were as sharp as blades as he rebuked Lian Jiufeng coldly. Lian Jiufeng was not injured. He did not dare to attack, so he only knew how to shout. If Nietian had the strength, he would have attacked a long time ago. Lian Jiufeng would not have needed to shout at all, but right now he did not have the power to kill the Netherworld Emperor. "Lian Jiufeng, Nietian, both of you will die here today." The Netherworld Emperor suddenly growled. The demonic energy around his body became violent to the extreme, and a strange power suddenly surged through the air. Chapter 3600. Meet again. Nietian's eyes froze when he saw this. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. What was the Netherworld Emperor trying to do? "Power of the Dawn of Wolves, come out." The Netherworld Emperor growled again. The bloody tentacles unleashed a violent aura of blood. They formed a blood-sacrificial incantation in the air and wrapped around 7 kills and the others. Nietian's eyes shook. He then felt the power of the Dawn of Wolves inside 7 kills and the others become active. It seemed like it was about to burst out of their bodies. He wants to absorb their power of the Dawn of Wolves. Nietian immediately realized and exclaimed in his mind. The Netherworld Emperor wanted to absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves inside 7 kills and the others. "Nietian, we cannot let him absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves." Lian Jiufeng also realized and shouted in panic. I know, Nye Tian growled with a frown. The Netherworld Emperor might be able to preserve his life by forcefully removing the heaven-punishing demon heart, but his strength would definitely plummet. In order to recover some of his strength, the Netherworld Emperor wanted to absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves. In reality, the Netherworld Emperor had already made up his mind. After the gate of heaven punishing opened, he would kill everyone and sacrifice the power of Nye Tian and the others to it. At the same time, he would absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves. But now, Lien Jiufeng and Nye Tian were out of his control. He could only absorb the power of the Dawn of Wolves first. Boom! 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 At this time, there was a thunderous roar. Blazing white spheres of light appeared on 7 kills and the others. This was the power of Wolf Dawn. The Netherworld Emperor used the power of the Great Formation of Heaven, punishing 9, to forcefully remove the power of the Dawn of Wolves from 7 kills and the others. Steal the Dawn of Wolves. Lien Jiufeng's eyes shook. He growled and charged toward the Dawn of Wolves like a ball of fire. At the same time, Nye Tian also moved. He stretched out his hand, and sword intent surged madly, forming a net of sword intent that enveloped him. 8 wolves, how many can you snatch? At this moment, the Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out like thunder. Immediately, the blood-colored tentacles in the air went berserk, grabbing at Nye Tian and blazing ninefold. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he forcefully released a wave of dragon chi to block the blood-colored tentacles. Then, he grabbed with his hand and grabbed Lang Chun. On the other side, Lien Jiufeng unleashed the power of golden flames from all over his body. A ball of flames howled as it shot towards Lang Chun. He actually wanted to directly destroy Wolf Dawn's power. However, after the ball of flames fell, not only did it not destroy Lang Chun, but it also pushed Lang Chun towards the Emperor of the Underworld. Lien Jiufeng had underestimated Lang Chun's strength. It was impossible for him to destroy Lang Chun with his current strength. Idiot! Nye Tian abruptly turned around and scolded Lien Jiufeng angrily. Lien Jiufeng frowned and moved again. He was just about to grab the other Wolf Chun when a bloody tentacle grabbed him. Damn it! Lien Jiufeng growled. The flames on his body went berserk and shattered the bloody tentacle. The Emperor of the Underworld was terrifying, but he could no longer unleash the true power of the great sacrificial formation of Heaven, punishing 9 under the torture of the extreme soul-killing technique. In the next moment, Lien Jiufeng moved and forcibly grabbed a Wolf Chun. However, when he looked around, he discovered that all the Wolf Chun had disappeared. He abruptly turned around to look at Nye Tian. The latter had 2 Wolf Chun in his hand. The Emperor of the Underworld had absorbed the remaining 5 Wolf Chun. Oh no! Lien Jiufeng cried out. Then, he looked at the Emperor of the Underworld with a tremble in his eyes. The terrifying heaven-punishing demonic energy roiled around the Emperor of the Underworld's body. The power of 5 Wolf Chun surrounded the demonic energy, making it look even more dazzling. Screw it! Lien Jiufeng's pupils contracted. He roared and unleashed the power of golden flames from his body. He took a step forward and tried to attack. Wait! But it was at this moment Nye Tian let out a low roar and moved to block Lien Jiufeng's path. Lien Jiufeng was stunned. He looked at Nye Tian and asked, "What is it?" Nye Tian frowned. A sword intent surged out of his palm and surged toward the Emperor of the Underworld. The sword intent was devoured by the heaven-punishing demonic energy the moment it approached the Emperor of the Underworld. Lien Jiufeng couldn't help but gasp when he saw this. His expression froze. If Nye Tian hadn't stopped him, the heaven-punishing demonic energy around the Emperor of the Underworld would have devoured him instantly. Lien Jiufeng, I told you that you can't kill me. The Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out. The heaven-punishing demonic energy around his body grew even more turbulent, and the heaven-punishing gate appeared behind him once more. How is this possible? Lien Jiufeng's eyes trembled when he saw this. He was absolutely shocked. He hadn't thought that the Emperor of the Underworld would still be able to summon the heaven-punishing gate at a time like this. Nye Tian, Lien Jiufeng, We will meet again." The Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out once more. He moved and stepped into the heaven-punishing gate. His figure disappeared. The power of 5 wolves actually disappeared along with him. Only the heaven-punishing demonic energy and the abyss-like heaven-punishing gate were left in the air. It was as if the heaven-punishing gate had opened a space-time passageway and allowed the Emperor of the Underworld to enter another space. Nietion and Lion Jiofeng were dumbfounded. They couldn't speak for a long time. Just what kind of trick did the Emperor of the Underworld use to escape with the heaven-punishing gate? It was unexpected that such a thrilling battle would end in such a manner. A long time later, Nietion and Lian Jiofeng calmed down a little. They exchanged a strange look with each other. Nietion didn't say anything. He started checking on Lan Zhuiying and the others. Lan Zhuiying and the others were unconscious, but their auras were stable. They seemed to have recovered. The Emperor of the Underworld had stripped them of the power of the wolves and allowed them to regain their consciousness. Nietion carefully placed Lan Zhuiying and the others on the ground and waited for them to wake up. Meanwhile, Lian Jiofeng was staring at the demonic energy whirlpool in the air. His eyes trembled slightly and shone with unconcealable heat. The heaven-punishing gate had disappeared. The violent demonic energy had condensed into a black whirlpool that radiated an extremely dark aura. Lian Jiofeng, you aren't thinking about the heaven-punishing demon heart, are you? Nietion frowned and asked Lian Jiofeng. The demonic energy whirlpool was the heaven-punishing demon heart that had been stripped from the Emperor of the Underworld. Lian Jiofeng seemed to be very interested in the heaven-punishing demon heart. Can I? The corner of Lian Jiofeng's mouth twitched. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Nietion's expression darkened. He watched as the demonic energy whirlpool gradually stabilized. It seemed that the bloodline power it had absorbed earlier was slowly dissipating. Chapter 3601. Vicious and merciless Lian Jiofeng looked at the heaven-punishing demon heart with undisguisable passion as he said this. The heaven-punishing demon heart was right in front of him. How could he not be tempted? Moreover, the heaven-punishing demon heart would immediately return to its original state after losing its master. This was the best time to fuse with the demon heart. Lian Jiofeng, do you really want to fuse with the heaven-punishing demon heart? Nietion looked at Lian Jiofeng and frowned. He became much more cautious. Can I? Lian Jiofeng's eyes darkened slightly. He looked coldly at Nietion and said, Nietion, can you still stop me with your current strength? Nietion's eyes focused slightly. He did not plan to stop Lian Jiofeng. He had no interest in the heaven-punishing demon heart. He only wanted to know how to unseal Cher's memories. Nietion, I know what you're thinking. At this moment, Lian Jiofeng smiled faintly as a blood-red jade appeared in his hand. He tossed it to Nietion and said, This is the 3 Lives Blood Soul Jade. It can help Shui recover her memories. Nietion caught the 3 Lives Blood Soul Jade and focused slightly. Then, he probed it with his consciousness and felt the presence of the meridian of 3 lives. However, he was still worried. He frowned and asked, How can I trust you? I, Lian Jiofeng, may not be a good person, but I still have integrity. Lian Jiofeng laughed and said, Also, Cher recovering her memories is not bad for me. On the contrary, the person I need to worry about is you. If I were you, I wouldn't allow Shui to regain her memories. I'd let her stay by your side and be your Shui dutifully. Isn't that good? I do not need you to teach me how to do things. Nietion said coldly. He wanted to see the complete Cher. Even if Cher really left him after she recovered her memory, he wouldn't regret it. After all, it was Cher's own choice. You are more open and forthright than I am, but this is your greatest weakness. Lian Jiofeng sneered and said, With your talent, if you were a little more ruthless, your current strength would be even more terrifying. How I choose is my own business. You just take care of yourself. Nietion responded coldly. Then, he put away the 3 Lives Blood Soul Jade and said, The heaven-punishing demon heart is yours. However, I have to remind you that the Underworld Emperor is not dead yet. Is he still the emperor of the netherworld after losing the heaven-punishing devil heart? Lion Jiufeng smiled wickedly. His eyes were filled with arrogance and confidence. Once he merged with the heaven-punishing demon heart, would he still be afraid of the emperor of the underworld? The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He didn't think that the emperor of the netherworld would become very weak after losing the heaven-punishing demon heart. After all, before the emperor of the netherworld left, he had taken away 5 wolf geniuses. Wolf geniuses were the sacred relic of the celestial wolf race. No one could predict how strong 5 wolf geniuses would be. Moreover, Nie Tian had a vague feeling that the emperor of the netherworld's disappearance from the heaven-punishing gate was not as simple as it seemed. In any case, he had no interest in the heaven-punishing demon heart. If Lian Jiufeng wanted it, he could just give it to him. Nie Tian. At this time, a weak voice sounded. Nie Tian suddenly turned around and saw that Su Kuanga had woken up. You're fine now. Don't move around. Recover your strength first. Nie Tian took a step forward and made Su Kuanga sit. Nie Tian, what happened? Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes. He seemed a little lost. We'll talk about it after we get out. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He looked at the others and prepared to leave after everyone had recovered a little. The emperor of the netherworld was dead, but Lian Jiufeng was still alive. He should know the exit of the celestial wolf path. Save me. Then, another weak voice sounded. It was intermittent and sounded very weak. Nie Tian frowned. The person who had woken up was 7 kills. 7 kills had used the extreme soul-killing move, but he was still alive. 7 kills. I didn't think you'd still be alive. Lian Jiufeng was stunned. Then, his eyes flashed with cold, killing intent as he looked at 7 kills. He didn't think that 7 kills would still be alive after using the extreme soul-killing move. The extreme soul-killing move was 7 kills bloodline taboo move. Once it was used, he should have died for sure. Perhaps his martial body had absorbed some of Profound Star's power after he was possessed by Xianshun. That was why he was still alive. Save me. 7 kills' eyes trembled. He looked at Lian Jiufeng with pain and desire. He stretched out a hand as if he wanted to grab onto the last straw of hope. Heaven-punishing demon heart. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He suddenly thought of something and exclaimed at his heart. Right now, 7 kills was on his last breath. If he was allowed to merge with the heaven-punishing demon heart, he would definitely survive. But with Lian Jiufeng around, he would not allow 7 kills to merge with the heaven-punishing demon heart. 7 kills. You want to kill the emperor of the underworld and avenge your clansmen. Lian Jiufeng's eyes flashed wickedly. He walked over to 7 kills and said, I will help you fulfill your last wish. Last wish? Nie Tian frowned when he heard Lian Jiufeng's words. His expression changed. Have a safe journey, 7 kills. In the next moment, Lian Jiufeng's eyes flashed coldly. He extended a hand and slammed it down on 7 kills' head. Bang! A muffled cracking sound could be heard. Shishat didn't even have time to react before the top of his head exploded. His eyes suddenly became sluggish. His supreme killer demon eyes trembled for a moment before they stiffened and lost their color of life in an instant. Before he died, his eyes were still looking at the heaven-punishing devil heart. He was looking at the last sliver of hope for survival. His eyes were filled with a mixture of desire and despair. As the palm fell, it suddenly stopped. Lian Jiufeng. The sudden scene caused Nie Tian's eyes to tremble. He looked at Lian Jiufeng, but he couldn't say anything for a time. He hadn't thought that Lian Jiufeng would be so ruthless as to kill 7 kills without hesitation. 7 kills was born from the heaven-punishing demon heart with him. From a certain perspective, the two of them were related by blood. Moreover, they had fought side by side many times in the past. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were best friends. But Lian Jiufeng was actually willing to kill a companion like this. Everything happened so suddenly that Nie Tian couldn't react in time. 7 kills was willing to sacrifice himself to take revenge on the emperor of the underworld. But after he did all that, Lian Jiufeng actually killed him with his own hands. The viciousness of Lian Jiufeng's heart was evident. Boom! Then, a ball of fire surged out of Lian Jiufeng's palm and burned 7 kills. There was only a pile of ashes on the ground. 7 kills, aura was gone. Chapter 3602. The Heart of the World. Lian Jiufeng's gaze was dark. Golden flames surged in his eyes, but his pupils were as deep as the abyss. They were filled with bottomless darkness. Does your martial path consist of killing your companions? Nie Tian's expression was dark, and his eyes were filled with undisguisable anger. He said coldly, "If the path of martial must be built on the bones of my companions, then I don't mind walking this path. The world of martial Tao has always been one where the strong are revered. The hands of those who stand at the peak of the martial Tao are stained with blood." Lian Jiufeng said coldly, "How many people did the Emperor of the Netherworld kill? How much blood did he have on his hands? So, you want to become the next Emperor of the Netherworld?" Nie Tian's expression was cold, and his eyes flashed slightly. "Is there anything wrong with me wanting to become stronger?" Lian Jiufeng sneered. His eyes were filled with cold arrogance. "Are you willing to do anything to become stronger?" Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly as he asked coldly. "The path of the strong has always been a bloody one. I will kill anyone who stands in my way." Lian Jiufeng's expression was dark. He was like an iceberg, and he radiated a bone-chilling coldness. "Our paths are different. I hope we don't meet again," Nie Tian said coldly with a frown. "If you help Cher recover her memories, we will definitely meet again." Lian Jiufeng's lips curled into an evil smile. Then he tossed a scroll to Nie Tian and said, "This is the map of the path of the Heavenly Wolf. You can leave now." Nie Tian accepted the map and did not say anything. He opened it and checked it. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he prepared to leave. At this time, Lan Zhuying and the others woke up. They looked at Nie Tian and Lian Jiufeng in confusion. They did not know what had happened. "I'm going to leave this place now. Those who want to leave can come with me. Those who don't, I won't force you." Nie Tian glanced at the others and said coldly. Everyone recovered a little and stood up. Although they didn't say anything, they all came to stand behind Nie Tian. They obviously wanted to leave with Nie Tian. No one wanted to stay in this damned place any longer. Nie Tian no longer hesitated and headed straight for the exit of the canyon. Nie Tian. It was at this moment Lian Jiufeng suddenly called out to him. "Is there anything else?" Nie Tian paused for a moment, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he spoke in a cold tone. "Remember my words. If Cher recovers her memories, you'll regret it," Lian Jiufeng said solemnly. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything and directly left. He had made up his mind long ago. No matter what Lian Jiufeng said, he would not change his mind. Nie Tian followed the map and quickly found the exit of the Celestial Wolf Road. The moment they walked out of the Celestial Wolf Road, everyone let out a breath of turbid air. Their tensed faces relaxed. Nie Tian, what happened in the Celestial Wolf Road? Why did our strength increase so much? At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but ask. Nie Tian didn't hide anything and told them about how they were possessed by Lang Chun. "So it's like this." Everyone was shocked and couldn't react for a long time. So they had been possessed and stimulated by Lang Chen's power, which was why their strength increased so much. But now, after Lang Chen's power left their bodies, their consciousness had recovered, but their martial bodies were a little weak compared to their current strength. Their auras were a little weak, and their realms were very unstable. After you return, it's best if you cultivate in seclusion, improve your martial bodies, and stabilize your realms. Nie Tian's gaze swept across everyone and said indifferently, "Nie Tian, thank you." Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes flickered as she said indifferently. Nie Tian nodded and smiled with a calm expression. "Nie Tian, thank you." Yin Liujia and the others had ugly expressions. After hesitating for a moment, they still went forward to thank him. There was some conflict between them and Nie Tian, but in the Celestial Wolf Road, Nie Tian had truly saved their lives. If not for Nie Tian, they would have already become sacrifices under the heaven-punishing 9 sacrifices. And in the end, if not for Nye Tian, Lai and Jiufeng probably wouldn't have let them leave. Nye Tian, your injuries are not light. Why don't you return to the Su family with me first? At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Nye Tian and invited him warmly. All right, Nye Tian thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. He was currently in a very bad state. If he left immediately, it was indeed not very safe. He had to rest for a few days before leaving. Brother Su, I also want to stay in your residence for a few days. I wonder if I have the honor? Ing Sangxiong suddenly looked at Su Kuanga and asked with a smile. Of course. Su Kuanga laughed. His gaze swept across everyone present and said, If you want to come, the Su family also welcomes you. Bodhi Seed, Yin Liujia and the others did not show any interest and left one after another. Nye Tian, you and I are both people who possess the heart of heaven and earth. We will meet again. Before leaving, Bodhi Seed looked at Nye Tian and said solemnly. Nye Tian's gaze slightly froze. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. However, before he could ask anything, the Bodhi Seed had already left. Lan Zhuiying stayed behind and was willing to go with Nye Tian to the Su family. Half a day later, under Su Kuanga's lead, Nye Tian, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sangxiong arrived at the Su residence. Su Kuanga asked the servants to arrange a room for Nye Tian and the others, so that Nye Tian and the others could settle down in peace. In the room, Nye Tian sat cross-legged. The 9 extremes war god art slowly circulated within his body. Waves of energy flowed through his body, and the wounds all over his body began to slowly heal. His previous injuries were too heavy. Although the wounds on the outer layer of his skin had healed, there were some near-fatal injuries in his body that had not fully recovered. About a day later, his injuries had mostly recovered. Next, he began to thoroughly examine his martial body. On this trip to the Heavenly Wolf Road, he could be considered to have gained a lot. He could be considered to have understood some things about the Emperor of the Underworld. Moreover, he had also obtained the strongest power of the 9 Great Wolf Stars. After he fused with the power of the Emperor Star, his strength directly broke through to the 8th level of Heavenly Yun Realm, and his martial body had also improved a lot. Faintly, he felt that the power of the Emperor Star had a deeper impact on his martial body, but he had not yet discovered it. At this time, Nye Tian was even more interested in the Heart of the Sky. He really wanted to know what kind of power the Heart of the Sky was. The Bodhi child said that we are all people who possess the heart of the heaven and earth. What does this mean? He recalled the words of the Bodhi child before he left and could not help but frown. The Heart of the Sky. It seemed that Nye Tian's Heart of the Sky, the Bodhi child's Bodhi Buddha heart, and the Emperor of the Underworld's heaven-punishing devil heart were all heart of the heaven and earth. Nye Tian did not know what the heart of the heaven and earth was and how many heart of the heaven and earth were there in this world. Then, Nye Tian took out the sky sword and could not help but frown as he looked at it with a strange expression. Also, what is the sword of the sky that was born from the heart of the sky? He almost did not know anything about the heart of the sky. Chapter 36:03. Chapter 35:98. Sword formation in the sky. What is this? Nye Tian looked at the sword in the sky and suddenly realized that it was densely covered with tiny runes that looked very strange, as if they were engraved on the body of the sword. Nye Tian couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He found that those exquisite magical symbols seemed to contain endless changes and were extremely mysterious. He used his divine sense to explore the sword in the sky and felt as if he was in a boundless world of sword intent. Around him, illusory sword shadows floated and rotated in the void, drawing countless strange sword techniques in the air. These sword techniques were very strange, and yet Tian had never seen them before. Every move of the sword techniques looked extremely clumsy, but as they rotated, they gave off a feeling of floating clouds and flowing water, as if they were endless. After a long time, Nye Tian withdrew his divine sense and found that his forehead was covered in beads of sweat. He had consumed a lot of mental strength when he was sensing the sword techniques. What kind of power is contained in the sword in the sky? Nietion's eyes trembled slightly as he looked at the sword in the sky in his hand in shock. Nietion, this should be a sword formation. At this moment, while Nietion was still in a state of shock, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out. A sword formation? Nietion frowned. His eyes flickered with astonishment, and he was taken aback. It was hard to imagine that a sword contained a sword formation. Nietion, try to deduce it and see if your sword intent can activate the sword formation. The Ghost Emperor spoke again with a fiery expression and seemed very excited. Nietion took a deep breath and calmed himself down. After nodding, he used his divine sense to enter the sword in the sky and the world of sword intent once again. At this moment, he began to release his sword intent, merging it with the sword intent in the surrounding space. Then, according to the illusory sword style, he slowly deduced it bit by bit. In the beginning, Nietion's movements were very slow. Those seemingly clumsy sword moves were rather difficult to deduce. Later, after deducing it several times, his speed became faster and faster, and the sword intent in the surrounding space also began to flow along with his sword intent, surging along with it. There is indeed the aura of the array intent. At this moment, Nietion felt the aura of a formation coming from the void. His expression changed slightly, and he was extremely surprised. He could sense the power of the formation in the air, and its aura was getting stronger and stronger. It seemed like the Ghost Emperor was right. The runes on the sky sword were a sword formation. Nietion managed to maintain his composure and began to focus even more on sensing the surging sword wills in the surrounding space. However, the more he concentrated, the more he realized that the power contained in this world of sword intent far exceeded his imagination. He was simply unable to believe that the clear sky sword actually contained such terrifying power. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Nietion repeatedly deduced thousands of sword styles in the sky sword. As the sword styles continued to change, sword runes began to appear in the space, and a tremendous aura circulated, giving off a magnificent feeling. The first sword formation go. At this moment, Nietion suddenly let out a deep roar as he executed the last move in his hand. Suddenly, the space around him shook violently, and a tremendous force of the sword formation was unleashed, impacting the void. Bang! At this moment, an enormous sword formation appeared in the void, with the power of runes circulating wildly. It was mysterious and enormous. Nietion's eyes trembled, and his eyes burned with passion. He could sense the tremendous power contained in the sword formation. The runes were extremely clear and emitted a sense of immortality and mystery. This was the first sword formation that Nietion had inscribed from the sky sword. The sky sword contained endless sword intent, and Nietion's understanding of sword intent and sword styles allowed him to inscribe the first sword formation. Nietion withdrew his divine sense from the clear sky sword. His eyes, however, were staring at the clear sky sword in his hand with incomparable fervor. He saw an extremely small speck of light appear on the clear sky sword. It was as if a bright island had appeared in the sea of countless symbols. This bright place was the sword formation that Nietion had inscribed. The sword formation has appeared on the sky sword. Nietion's eyes trembled, and his expression became sluggish. He did not expect that the sword formation he had inscribed would directly appear on the sky sword. This was a little similar to the time when he inscribed his astral souls. The excitement he felt was indescribable. Nietion, the sky sword contains endless sword formations. What you have inscribed is only one of the tens of thousands of sword formations, the Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice. This, Nietion's eyes trembled slightly, and he could not speak for a long time. The sword array that he had spent 3 days to inscribe on the clear sky sword was only an almost invisible speck of light. It was hard to believe just how enormous was the sword array contained on the clear sky sword. Nietion, These sword formations are extremely profound. Even I can't comprehend them. The Ghost Emperor's voice continued. I'm guessing that the sword formation on the Sky Sword is a complete sword formation. However, this sword formation can be separated into countless smaller sword formations. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Niet Tian was stunned once again, and his face turned numb. He had spent 3 days to inscribe a tiny light spot on the sword formation in the Sky Sword. If the entire sword formation in the Sky Sword was a complete sword formation, it was hard to imagine how powerful it would be. Niet Tian, give it a try and see if you can activate the sword formation. The Ghost Emperor's eyes flickered, and he said to Niet Tian excitedly, All right. Niet Tian's eyes flickered, and he reacted. He nodded his head heavily, and with a thought, he activated the sword formation on the Sky Sword. Boom! Just at this moment, the clear Sky Sword suddenly released an enormous aura of sword intent. Immediately after, an enormous sword aura soared into the sky, like a huge dragon, violently attacking. Rumble! In the next instant, the room that Niet Tian was in was struck by the sword intent and collapsed. High up in the sky, the Su family's protective formation was also impacted, and it was on the verge of collapsing. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and his face darkened. He used his divine sense to withdraw the sword formation. His eyes trembled, and after a while, he murmured, I didn't expect the power of the sword formation to be so strong. The Su family was considered a powerful force in the Wolf's Night Mountain. Although the protective formation wasn't too strong, it was definitely a rank 3 or rank 4 sacred formation. He didn't expect that the sword formation that Niet Tian had spent 3 days to inscribe would almost destroy the Su family's protective formation. Chapter 3604. Chapter 3599. Chapter 359. Returning late. What happened? After a while, the guards of the Su family appeared. Dozens of figures looked at Niet Tian in astonishment. They did not know what was going on in front of them. Sorry, I made a mistake and destroyed the house. Niet Tian smiled awkwardly and nodded. These guards knew that Niet Tian was Su Kuanga's friend, so they did not say anything and dispersed. Then Su Kuanga, Lan Zhuiying, Ing Sangxiong, and the others appeared. They were speechless when they saw the embarrassed Niet Tian. Niet Tian smiled faintly with a helpless expression. Su Kuanga and the others did not immediately go into seclusion, but waited for Niet Tian to recover. Su Kuanga, sorry to disturb you for the past few days. My strength has recovered. It's time to leave. Niet Tian turned around and looked at the destroyed house, then bid farewell to Su Kuanga. He had been in Wolf's Night Mountain for some time. It was time to leave. Niet Tian, where are you going next? Su Kuanga frowned and asked reluctantly. I should go with him. The corner of Niet Tian's mouth twitched as he looked at Ing Sangxiong. He already knew that Ing Sangxiong was a member of the 5 forces behind the Heart of Sky. It was time for Niet Tian to go back and give an explanation to the 5 forces. Niet Tian, are you really going with me? Ing Sangxiong's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect Niet Tian to leave with him so easily. The reason why he appeared in Wolf's Night Mountain was for the Heart of Sky, and the 5 forces behind the Heart of Sky. There were too many people who wanted the Heart of Sky. If Niet Tian went like this, he would inevitably be in danger. Niet Tian smiled faintly and said calmly, I'll have to face it sooner or later. Before he had entered the Saint's world, Zhong Mingyu had told him that meeting the people of the 5 organizations would definitely be dangerous. But now that he had fused with the Heart of the Sky and the title of the Lord of the Sky, he had to face all of this. All he could do was make the 5 great factions accept him. All right, I'll bring you to the Qingquan Gate. Ing Sangxiong looked at Niet Tian and finally nodded. During this period of time, he had gained some understanding of Niet Tian. Regardless of what the other 5 forces thought, Ing Sangxiong had already accepted Niet Tian's identity as the Master of the Sky. He even believed that Niet Tian had the ability to reunite the 5 major forces, which had already fallen apart. However, he still felt that Niet Tian seemed to be in too much of a hurry to meet the people from the 5 great forces now. Niet Tian, we will meet again. Su Kuanga knew that he could not keep Niet Tian, So he calmly smiled and said, "We definitely will." Yet Tian smiled faintly and said, "I hope we can have a good fight the next time we meet." "I hope so." Su Kuanga nodded with a smile, but the corner of his mouth was somewhat bitter. He knew that his talent was not as good as Tian's. The next time they met, Tian's strength would probably far surpass his. He could only hope that he would not be left too far behind by Tian. "Ah, I forgot about that little girl." At this moment, Tian was about to leave, but he suddenly thought of someone and could not help but cry out. Su Kuanga and the others were stunned, not knowing what had happened. Tian was embarrassed. He immediately took out the 9 Extreme and let Ning Ziyu out. Tian. Ning Ziyu came out of the 9 Extreme like a beast that had been locked in a cage for a long time. She cried out. Her voice was rather sharp and piercing. "I will send you home now." Tian's face was ugly as he forced a smile. He had been too nervous during this period of time. Ever since he entered the Wolf's Night City, he had not relaxed. Even after arriving at the Su clan, he had been recovering his body. Later, because he was too excited about the sword formation in the sky, he temporarily forgot about Ning Ziyu. "Go back now." Immediately. Ning Ziyu was like a crazy little tiger as she shouted, "If I miss the clan selection, I will not forgive you." Tian had a helpless expression and could only nod at the side. Then, Tian did not stay any longer. After getting Ing Tsangqiong's permission, he decided to send Ning Ziyu back to the Ning clan before going to the Qingquan sect. What surprised Tian was that Lan Zhuiying actually took the initiative to go with him. He did not want to agree at first, but Lan Zhuiying was very insistent. He had no choice but to agree. As for Lan Zhuiying, Tian could not see through her. Her identity was very mysterious, and she was very strong. Tian could not understand why a woman like Lan Zhuiying would want to follow him. He would never deliberately think badly of a person, but he would never trust a person easily either. At least for now, he still could not treat Lan Zhuiying as a trustworthy friend. Next, Su Kuanga helped Tian and the others arrange a flying beast. Then, the 4 of them directly left the Wolf's Night Mountain and headed for the 1,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce branch in the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators. Along the way, Ning Ziyu kept asking Tian what had happened over the past few days. Perhaps she could not accept that Tian's strength had increased so quickly and that he was about to become a peak holy disciple. Tian was really annoyed by the questions, so he called Duanmu Lu and the others out and gave Ning Ziyu to them. Ing Tsangqiong had a strange look on his face. Obviously, he did not expect that there would be so many people around Tian. About 5 days later, Tian and the others arrived outside a magnificent ancient city. Above the city gate, there was an incomparably powerful character engraved. Ning. This city was the 1,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce branch in the 7th Sacred World of Cultivators. The simple character Ning represented the absolute authority of the Ning family in this city. "It's here." Ning Ziyu looked at the huge city below. While she was excited, there was also a bit of worry on her face. She said, "I wonder if the family selection is over." Tian originally did not want to enter the city and planned to let Ning Ziyu enter the city alone. However, the latter was unwilling and insisted on him accompanying her. Tian was somewhat helpless. At the same time, he was also worried about Ning Ziyu's safety, so he followed her into the city. A moment later, Tian and the others arrived outside the Ning residence. With Ning Ziyu leading the way, the guards of the Ning residence naturally did not dare to stop them. "Eldest Miss Yu, you're finally back." Just as they entered the residence, a gray-robed old man walked over. When he saw Ning Ziyu from afar, his eyes trembled and he cried out in surprise. "Uncle Fu!" Ning Ziyu saw the old man and cried out in joy. She quickly walked over and anxiously asked, "Has the family selection started?" "Sai, it's already over." Uncle Fu sighed and said, "The 3 candidates have already been decided." "Eldest Miss, you're late." This, Ning Ziyu was stunned. Her entire body froze and did not react for a long time. It seemed that the Ning family selection was very important to her. Tian looked at Ning Ziyu and frowned. He quickly walked to Uncle Fu's side and said, "Uncle Fu, please bring us to the main hall." "You are." Uncle Fu looked at Nietian and was shocked by the latter's aura. His expression froze, and he was quite frightened. "Uncle Fu, he's my friend. Bring us to the main hall first." Ning Ziyu calmed down and said in a deep voice. "Yes," Uncle Fu replied, and immediately brought Nietian and the others to the Ning residence's main hall. 19th Sister. Just as they arrived outside the main hall, a familiar voice was heard. Then, a figure flew out from the main hall. Chapter 36:05. Is this a joke? Nietian looked at the person in front of him. His gaze instantly turned gloomy, and a chilling intent surged in his eyes. Ning Zifeng's eyes flickered slightly as he looked at Nietian. He seemed somewhat vigilant, and his expression was very ugly. Nietian already knew that he wanted to kill Ning Ziyu. If it weren't for Nietian, Ning Ziyu would have already died in his hands. He didn't expect that Nietian and Ning Ziyu would actually come back at this time. "Ziyu." At this moment, a slightly excited voice rang out. Then, a figure rushed out from the hall. The instant he saw Ning Ziyu, his eyes blazed with excitement. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. It was a middle-aged man dressed in luxurious clothes. He looked elegant and dignified, but his loss of composure made him lack the dignity that he should have. "Father." Ning Ziyu looked at the middle-aged man and couldn't help but call out in a low voice. This middle-aged man was none other than her father, the president of the Thousand Treasures Chamber of Commerce's 7 cultivators of true virtue branch, Ning Mingyuan. "Ziyu, are you all right? Where have you been all this time?" Ning Mingyuan recovered slightly, and his eyes darkened. Although he was angry, his tone revealed unconcealable concern. "I'm fine." Ning Ziyu nodded slightly. She looked very sad and said, "I'm sorry, father. I came back late." "It's good that you're back." Ning Mingyuan nodded heavily. Although he spoke casually, he couldn't conceal the disappointment in his heart. He was originally very optimistic about Ning Ziyu and hoped that she could pass the clan selection and enter a higher world. Ning Ziyu was very young and talented. If she could enter a higher world, it would undoubtedly be very beneficial for her future cultivation. Unfortunately, she came back too late. The clan selection had already ended, and she didn't know when such an opportunity would come again. At this moment, Ning Zifeng suddenly pointed at Nietian and said fiercely, "Father, this is the brat who kidnapped 19th Sister." Nietian frowned, and his face darkened. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. Ning Zifeng wanted to kill Ning Ziyu, but now he was framing Nietian, saying that Nietian had kidnapped Ning Ziyu. How could Nietian not be angry? "You kidnapped my daughter and still dare to appear in the Ning family. Brat, you really have guts." Ning Mingyuan abruptly stared at Nietian. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he released his chi, causing the surrounding space to tremble. After which, his chi gushed towards Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed again. He didn't dodge. Instead, he took a step forward and the bluestone floor under his feet shattered. A surge of sword aura surged out and directly shattered Ning Mingyuan's aura. Ning Mingyuan took several steps back from the impact. After stabilizing himself, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He looked at Nietian with unconcealable shock. He didn't expect Nietian to be so strong that he could shatter his aura directly. After all, he was a 9th Heaven Mandate Saint Master, while Nietian was only at the 8th Heaven Mandate realm. How could Nietian block his aura? "Nietian, your strength is actually..." At this moment, Ning Zifeng looked at Nietian and couldn't help but exclaim. His eyes were trembling as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. He was so scared that he couldn't even speak. "Zifeng, what's wrong?" Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened when he saw Ning Zifeng's reaction. Father, his strength." Ning Zifeng pointed at Nietian. His eyes were trembling and his teeth were chattering. He couldn't speak at all. Ning Mingyuan frowned, and his expression darkened even more. He looked at Nietian with a hint of doubt. Nietian looked very young, but he was at the 8th Heaven Mandate realm. His talent was indeed shocking. However, this kind of talent shouldn't have frightened Ning Zifeng to the point where he couldn't speak. At this moment, Nye Tian took a step forward and said to Ning Zifeng with a faint smile, "What? Does my strength scare you? You impossible." Ning Zifeng's eyes were trembling. He took a few steps back subconsciously and exclaimed, "You can't be so strong. Absolutely impossible." "Zifeng, what's wrong?" Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened when he saw Ning Zifeng losing control. At this moment, the others in the hall also walked out. There were a few young warriors among them. They were quite strong and should be the new generation geniuses of the Ning clan. A warrior in green clothes, holding a folding fan, caught Nye Tian's attention. That person looked to be around 20 years old. His real age should be very young as well. However, he was actually a First Heaven Mandate Realm Saint Master. His talent could be seen from this. Apart from that, there was also a gray-robed elder with a vigorous aura. He was actually not weaker than the Wolf Emperor of the demonic Moon Sky Wolf. He should be a Saint Lord Tianni. At this moment, everyone looked at Ning Zifeng. They didn't know why the latter was acting so strangely. "Father, this kid is called Nye Tian. The last time I saw him, he was only at the First Heaven Mandate Realm. But now he's already at the 8th Heaven Mandate Realm," Ning Zifeng said with a trembling voice after he forced himself to calm down. Ning Mingyuan frowned, and his expression stiffened. The way he looked at Nye Tian clearly changed. He asked in a deep voice, "Zifeng, when was the last time you saw him?" More than a month ago." Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He seemed to be a little uncertain, or perhaps he was too nervous. "A month." Ning Mingyuan's eyes suddenly narrowed when he heard this. His face actually revealed some unconcealable fear. A warrior actually rose from the First Heaven Mandate Realm to the 8th Heaven Mandate Realm in a month. Was this really possible? Ning Mingyuan had heard that even the peak geniuses of the high-ranked sacred world needed several years or even decades to reach the Heavenly Mandate Realm. But this silver-haired warrior in front of him only used a month. How did he believe this? Unless Nye Tian had an amazing encounter and obtained some kind of inheritance power. However, any warrior who obtained inheritance power had to go into seclusion to cultivate. But now, Nye Tian's aura was steady and his realm was stable. He didn't seem like a warrior whose strength rose in an instant. However, the aura of the two people behind him was a little unstable. It seemed that their martial bodies couldn't keep up after their strength rose sharply. In short, Ning Mingyuan couldn't believe that Nye Tian could raise his strength from the First Heaven Mandate Realm to the 8th Heaven Mandate Realm in a month. Ning Zifeng, this kid can raise his strength by 7 Heaven Mandate Realms in a month? Are you kidding me? At this moment, the green-robed cultivator holding the folding fan who had been silent all this while suddenly spoke. His voice was deep and his eyes were filled with disdain. Obviously, he also didn't believe that Nye Tian could raise his strength so quickly. Chapter 3606. Worse than a pig. Young Master Chun, I'm not joking. Back in the City of Million Treasures, this brat was really only in the first layer of the Heavenly Charm Realm. Ning Zifeng looked at the cultivator in green and couldn't help but panic. He looked at Ning Ziyu and said, 19th sister can testify as well. The cultivator in green, who was addressed as young Master Chun, narrowed his eyes and a cold look flashed in them. He looked at Ning Ziyu and asked, Little girl, is what Ning Zifeng said true? Ning Ziyu's eyes flickered as if she was afraid. She couldn't help but look at Nye Tian. Ziyu, answer young Master Chun honestly. Ning Mingyuan's face darkened as he reprimanded coldly. He could tell that Ning Ziyu was very careful in front of Nye Tian. She seemed nervous, but this nervousness wasn't fear. Instead, it was trust. Ning Mingyuan couldn't help but feel doubtful. Did Nye Tian really kidnap Ning Ziyu? If that was the case, why did Ning Ziyu look at Nye Tian with trust and dependence? Just tell me the truth, Ning Ziyu. Nye Tian smiled faintly, his expression calm. Ning Ziyu's eyes flickered as she looked at Ning Mingyuan and the others. She nodded slightly and said, Nye Tian's strength has indeed increased a lot, but he's not a bad person. He didn't kidnap me. He's my guard and has always been protecting me. This. Ning Ming Yuan's eyes trembled and his face went blank for a moment. He only heard the beginning of Ning Ziyu's sentence, but couldn't hear the rest of it. If Ning Zifeng was too nervous and saw wrongly, then how could Ning Ziyu's word be explained? Ning Ziyu had that kind of power. She couldn't have seen wrongly. Ning Mingyuan looked at Nie Tian in a daze. He couldn't believe that this young cultivator in front of him had actually increased his strength by 7 layers in a month. Such talent was probably enough to crush those monstrous geniuses in the high-ranked sacred worlds. At this moment, the cultivator in green had a gloomy expression and a hint of coldness surged in his eyes. He now believed what Ning Zifeng and his sister had said. However, this changed his attitude towards Nie Tian from contempt to anger. In his heart, Nie Tian was just an elementary sacred world cultivator and did not deserve to have such great talent. When he thought that the martial artist in front of him actually had talent that far surpassed his, he felt an inexplicable anger and even resentment. In the end, he still looked down on Nie Tian. What's your name? At this time, Ning Mingyuan suddenly thought of something and his expression changed. He looked at Nie Tian with a trembling gaze and asked in surprise. Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He had already guessed why Ning Mingyuan had suddenly become so panicked. Not long ago, in Wolf Knight City's Wolf Slave Farm, there was a second-level heavenly charm martial artist who successfully defeated a heavenly wolf. His name was also Nie Tian. Was it you? Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled and his voice changed as he stared at Nie Tian nervously. It was me. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, but his expression remained indifferent. The battle against the heavenly wolf had spread his name throughout the entire sacred world of 7 cultivators. It was not strange for Ning Mingyuan to suddenly think of this matter. It really was you. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled as he shouted in horror. When he heard that there was a martial artist who defeated a heavenly wolf called Nie Tian, he immediately thought of Nie Tian. However, at that time, he was not sure that the martial artist who defeated the heavenly wolf was the Nie Tian he knew. He only had some suspicions in his heart. Now that Nie Tian personally admitted it, how could he not be surprised? Back in Million Treasure City, he had only interacted with Nie Tian for a short time and did not understand how terrifying Nie Tian was. At this moment, he truly realized how terrifying Nie Tian was. At this time, Nie Tian took a step forward and said to Ning Mingyuan, Lord Ning, I did not come here to show off my talent and strength. I simply came to escort Ning Ziyu back. This. Ning Mingyuan's expression stiffened, and he was momentarily speechless. How could he have imagined that such a terrifyingly talented martial artist would actually become Ning Ziyu's bodyguard? Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes flickered as she glanced at Nie Tian and said to Ning Mingyuan, Father, Nie Tian entered the wolf slave farm to save me. Ning Mingyuan's expression sank as he roared like a wild beast. You were captured by the wolf slave farm? Ning Ziyu smiled faintly and looked at Nie Tian proudly. I'm fine. It was all thanks to Nie Tian coming to save me. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, but he did not say anything. Actually, Ning Ziyu escaped from the wolf slave farm on her own. He only saved her from those who were chasing after her. Even now, Nie Tian still couldn't figure out how Ning Ziyu managed to escape from the wolf slave farm. Thank you, Mr. Nie Tian. After a moment, Ning Mingyuan reacted and bowed slightly, sincerely apologizing to Nie Tian. Father, Nie Tian is the one who kidnapped 19th sister. At this moment, Ning Zifeng, who was standing at the side, shouted anxiously. Shut up. Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened as he reprimanded Father. Do you think I'm blind? Ning Ziyu trusted Nie Tian so much that the look in her eyes could not be deceiving. Ziyu, you went to the city of Million Treasure alone. Why didn't you come back with your 5th brother? Ning Mingyuan seemed to have sensed something and asked with a frown. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes trembled. She looked at Ning Zifeng and stammered without saying anything. Ning Zifeng, what's going on? As the president of a chamber of commerce, Ning Mingyuan was extremely shrewd. He immediately saw through the clues, and his eyes turned cold. His gaze locked onto Ning Zifeng like a sharp knife. "Father." Ning Zifeng's eyes suddenly narrowed. His face froze in fear. His body was drenched in cold sweat, and he could not say a word. "Speak." Ning Mingyuan's eyes were extremely cold as he roared. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He subconsciously retreated, completely speechless. "Since Ning Zifeng doesn't want to speak, let me do it." Tian looked at Ning Zifeng, smiled faintly, and said, "If my guess is correct, Ning Zifeng already wanted to kill Ning Ziyu back in the Ning clan. He first cast a curse on Ning Ziyu's flying mount. However, Ning Ziyu was very lucky and did not die when the flying mount suddenly went out of control. After that, in the City of Million Treasure, Ning Zifeng tried to kill Ning Ziyu several times, but he was unable to kill her. This brother tried to kill his own sister time and time again. Do you think Ning Ziyu could still follow him back to the Ning residence?" After Tian finished speaking, he stared at Ning Zifeng with a pair of gloomy and contemptuous eyes. A person who even wanted to kill his own sister was worse than a pig or a dog. "It's you, it's all because of you." The moment Tian's words left his mouth, Ning Zifeng seemed to have gone mad as he suddenly started shouting. He pointed at Tian and growled, "If it weren't for you, Ning Ziyu would have died long ago." Chapter 3607. Chapter 362. Being a dog at this moment, Ning Mingyuan was truly enraged. His eyes were deep and murderous, and they were suffused with a dark red color. He stared at Ning Zifeng with an unconcealable killing intent. He could not tolerate his son trying to kill his daughter. "Father, Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He immediately felt Ning Mingyuan's murderous intent and terrifying aura. His entire body went limp, and he fell to the ground like a pile of mud. His lips trembled, but he could not say a word. "Bastard! How dare you kill your own sister?" Ning Mingyuan was enraged. His entire body was filled with rage, and he raised his hand. As long as his palm landed, Ning Zifeng would definitely die on the spot. "Father, I know I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I beg you, please spare me." Ning Zifeng curled up and trembled. His voice was filled with tears, and he looked extremely miserable. "If I spare you, what about the Ning family's rules?" Ning Mingyuan roared. Waves of energy began to gather on his palm. A furious aura gathered and was about to land in the next moment. "Third brother, ninth brother, help me plead for mercy." Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He suddenly looked at the two young warriors behind Ning Mingyuan and said, "Father." The two of them stepped forward and were about to speak, but were interrupted by Ning Mingyuan. "No matter who pleads for mercy today, it's useless. I must kill this unfilial son." Ning Mingyuan roared like thunder. Violent energy flowed in his palm as he struck with a decisive palm. Wait! However, at this moment, a voice that was not loud but filled with majesty rang out, causing Ning Mingyuan's killing palm to stop in midair. Ning Zifeng felt a strong wind blowing past him, causing his heart to skip a beat. He felt his buttocks heat up and the stench of urine spread. He was so scared that he peed his pants. "Young Master Chun?" Ning Mingyuan retracted his palm and turned to look at the warrior in green who suddenly spoke. The warrior in green was called Ning Liangchen. He came from the main Ning family and was the host of the Ning family selection this time. Originally, the day of the selection was over a month later. However, Ning Liangchen had arrived in advance. Thus, the selection was brought forward. Because Ning Liangchen was from the main family, and Ning Mingyuan was only a small branch of the Ning family, even Ning Mingyuan had to take Ning Liangchen's word seriously. "Ning Mingyuan, Ning Zifeng has been chosen by me. He will enter the main family soon." Ning Liangchen's eyes were cold as he looked at Ning Mingyuan playfully and said, "So, Ning Zifeng is now a member of the main family. Don't tell me you're going to kill people from the main house?" "Young Master Chen." Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled as he looked at Ning Liangchen with an astounded expression because he never imagined that the latter would actually say this. That's right, Ning Zifeng had been chosen and was about to enter the main family. Even so, Ning Zifeng was still Ning Mingyuan's son. Moreover, Ning Zifeng hadn't been chosen before he made the mistake. Could it be that just because he was chosen that the matter of him wanting to kill Ning Ziyu was over just like that? Ning Mingyuan, didn't you hear what I said clearly? Ning Liangshan's lips twitched, and his expression instantly darkened as he said Ning Mingyuan coldly. I heard it clearly. Ning Mingyuan's expression stiffened, but he still nodded and said, Since you heard it clearly, then back off. Ning Liangshan's eyes twitched as he reprimanded him coldly. Ning Mingyuan's expression was ugly, but he still backed off in the end. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. His expression was cold and stern. Ning Zifeng, if you want to live, then from now on, you have to stay by my side obediently and be my dog. Are you willing? At this moment, Ning Liangshan's lips twitched into a sinister smile as he looked at Ning Zifeng with a strange gaze. Yes, I'm willing. Ning Zifeng immediately crawled over and said repeatedly like a real dog. Very well. Ning Liangshan's lips twitched. His gaze roamed around Ning Mingyuan and the others, and he actually said, Ning Zifeng, bark for me twice now. Bark? How? Ning Zifeng was stunned and a little confused. Dog, don't you know how a dog barks? Ning Liangshan's gaze darkened as he said coldly. Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled and his expression froze for a moment. However, when he saw Ning Liangshan's murderous gaze, he couldn't care about anything else and actually barked, Woof! Woof, woof, woof. Zifeng? Ning Mingyuan was stunned by the scene before him. He growled but couldn't say anything. The son he had raised was actually acting like a dog in front of someone else. Such a scene made him feel like a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was even more painful than killing Ning Zifeng with his own hands. Those barks were like sharp blades, stabbing into his heart again and again. Fifth brother, get up quickly. Ning Ziyu reacted at this moment and said loudly, I'll tell father to forget about you killing me. Get up quickly. However, Ning Zifeng kept barking and looked at Ning Liangshan cautiously at the same time. It was obvious that he was very afraid. Ning Mingyuan and the other two sons behind him had dark and ugly expressions. In order to survive, Ning Zifeng was even willing to be a dog. Ning Mingyuan, you wanted to kill your son, but he became my dog. You must be feeling terrible right now, right? Ning Liangshan smiled coldly, and his expression was full of mockery. Enough! Ning Mingyuan couldn't take it anymore and growled. His eyes were filled with anger as he said in a deep voice, Ning Liangshan, I'm your uncle after all. How can you humiliate me like this? Uncle? Nie Tian's gaze trembled when he heard Ning Mingyuan's words, and his heart was filled with surprise. He originally thought that Ning Liangshan and Ning Mingyuan were from the same family. He didn't expect them to be so close. They were actually uncle and nephew. Ning Mingyuan, so you still remember that you're my uncle. Then do you remember how my father died? Ning Liangshan's eyes darkened as he stared at Ning Mingyuan with a murderous gaze. I killed him. Ning Mingyuan's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. His voice instantly became softer. That's right. You were the one who killed him. Do you think that I'm going overboard with how I'm treating your son right now? Ning Liangshan laughed coldly. To everyone's surprise, he stepped out and stomped on Ning Zifeng's face. Ning Zifeng wanted to resist, but he realized that he couldn't. Your father's death back then was an accident. Ning Mingyuan frowned and said in a deep voice, An accident? Ning Liangshan sneered and said, I'd like to hear what kind of accident it was. Ning Mingyuan's expression darkened. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said, Back then, your father cultivated a forbidden evil technique and killed thousands of his clansmen. I killed him because it was a family rule. Ning Liangshan's father was Ning Mingyuan's younger brother. However, he didn't follow the right path and cultivated an evil technique, killing thousands of his clansmen. Ning Mingyuan was ordered by the family to kill Ning Liangshan's father. Back then, even if Ning Mingyuan didn't do it, someone else would. Chapter 3608. A false accusation. Ning Liangshan lifted his leg and exerted all his strength. He could stomp Ning Zifeng to death with a single stomp. He was a first-tier Heavenly Mandate Realm Warrior, while Ning Zifeng was only a third-tier Heavenly Mandate Realm Warrior. No, The horrifying scene caused Ning Mingyuan's eyes to tremble, and he immediately cried out. Ning Liangchen's feet sank, and then he froze in midair. After that, he looked at Ning Mingyuan with an extremely gloomy expression and said with a smile, "My lord uncle, didn't you want to kill this dog just now? Why are you reluctant to do it now that I'm enforcing the family rules for you?" Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled, and he was momentarily speechless. He didn't want to kill Ning Zifeng just now, but he hesitated for a long time before making up his mind. No matter what Ning Zifeng did, he was his son after all. "I'll kill my son myself." Ning Mingyuan's expression changed, and he said in a deep voice, "You want to kill him? I won't let you. Ning Zifeng is my dog now. You can't kill him." Ning Liangchun smiled coldly. "You?" Ning Mingyuan's expression froze. His eyes trembled like a wild beast that was about to go berserk. It was obvious that Ning Liangchun was making fun of him. Nie Tian's lips twitched. He looked at Ning Liangchun with a gloomy gaze. This person was a psychopath. "Ning Zifeng, I've saved your worthless life. Aren't you happy?" At this moment, Ning Liangchun suddenly laughed. His eyes flickered with an evil glow as he spoke with a ghastly voice. "Thank you, young Master Chen. Thank you, young Master Chen. Thank you, young Master Chen." Ning Zifeng's eyes trembled. He was so scared that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He immediately kowtowed and said loudly, "Just this kind of thanks is far from enough." Ning Liangchun chuckled. "I'm asking you to do something now. You won't refuse, right?" "Of course not." Ning Zifeng nodded immediately. "Even if you ask me to do 100 or 1,000 things, I'll definitely do it." "All right." Ning Liangchun smiled faintly. His eyes turned cold as he looked at Ning Ziyu and pointed at her. "Now kill her." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. They froze on the spot and were speechless for a long time. Who would have thought that Ning Liangchun would actually want Ning Zifeng to kill Ning Ziyu? Ning Zifeng was stunned. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. His face turned extremely ugly, and he was speechless. "What, you're not willing?" Ning Liangchun frowned, and his face turned extremely gloomy as he said, "Don't you want to kill her? This young master gave you this chance, but you don't dare?" Ning Zifeng's expression froze. He really wanted to kill Ning Ziyu previously, but now that he had been chosen, Ning Ziyu was no longer a threat to him, so there was no need for him to kill Ning Ziyu. Moreover, how could he kill Ning Ziyu in front of Ning Mingyuan? "Ning Zifeng, don't be afraid. With me here, no one will dare to stop you." At this moment, Ning Liangchun smiled cold and said, "Now do it." "Ning Liangchun, have you had enough?" Ning Mingyuan could no longer hold it in. He roared furiously and released his aura like a wild beast. "What? Ning Mingyuan, are you trying to rebel?" However, Ning Liangchun was not intimidated by Ning Mingyuan at all. Instead, his expression darkened, and he said cold, "With my current identity, I can kill whoever I want. How dare you?" Ning Mingyuan roared in a low voice. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. "What do you think?" Ning Liangchun smiled evilly. He then took out a golden token and showed it to Ning Mingyuan. "This is..." Ning Mingyuan was shocked when he saw the token. He was stunned for a moment before he said, "A law enforcement token. Ning Mingyuan, you're quite knowledgeable to know that this is a law enforcement token." Ning Liangchun laughed coldly and said, "When you killed my father all those years ago, you used such a command token, right?" Ning Mingyuan's eyes trembled. He was speechless for a moment. He could not understand why Ning Liangchun would have a law enforcement token. Shouldn't law enforcement tokens only belong to the Ning clan's law enforcement hall? Moreover, under normal circumstances, people from the law enforcement hall would not casually show their law enforcement token unless it was necessary to enforce the law. Could it be? In the next moment, Ning Mingyuan suddenly thought of something. His expression changed, and his heart trembled inexplicably. His face was filled with extreme shock. "Ning Mingyuan, you're smart. You figured it out so quickly." Ning Liangchun smiled and said, "Your branch of 7 cultivators of true virtue has violated the Ning clan's rules. This time, I'm not only here to select 3 people to enter the main clan. I'm also here to handle matters for the law enforcement hall. What rule did my branch of 7 cultivators of true virtue break? Ningming Yuan's eyes trembled as he roared. I don't know about that. You should explain it to the people from the law enforcement hall. Ning Liangchun smiled cold and turned to Ning Zifeng. Now do it. Even if I broke the rules, what does it have to do with Ning Ziyu? Ningming Yuan's eyes darkened as he said cold. Ning Ziyu disobeyed the law enforcement hall's rules. I had no choice but to kill her. Is there a problem? Ning Liangchun's eyes darkened as he said cold. You. Ningming Yuan's eyes narrowed, and he was speechless. He did not expect Ning Liangchun to be so arrogant as to frame him with his eyes wide open. At this moment, he wanted to make a move. However, the gray-robed old man next to him was staring at him. This gray-robed old man was at least a first-stage heavenly justice great sage. Ningming Yuan was not his match at all. Ning Zifeng do it. At this moment, Ning Liangchun roared with boundless insolence. Ningming Yuan and the others watched from the side. They wanted to make a move, but they did not dare to. Once they made a move, the gray-robed old man would make a move. By then, Ning Ziyu would not be the only one to die. Ning Zifeng stood up and tried to walk towards Ning Ziyu. Zifeng, are you crazy? Ning Mingyuan roared. The aura in his body surged continuously, and his eyes were bloodshot. Father, I don't want to die. Ning Zifeng shook his head and said. He stared at Ning Ziyu with murderous intent. He knew that if he did not kill Ning Ziyu, Ning Liangchun would definitely kill him. Scram! Right at this moment, a low roar sounded out. After that, a violent sword aura whistled out and blasted Ning Liangchun flying. Following that, a figure stepped out, like a sharp sword in a mountain. He stood in front of Ning Ziyu. Ning Liangchun's eyes narrowed. He looked at Nye Tian cold and said in a deep voice, Brat, are you going against me? Chapter 3609. Chapter 364. Chapter 364. You gonna regret this. Nye Tian's voice wasn't loud, yet every single word he spoke was resolute and revealed a strand of resolution. Kid, this originally had nothing to do with you. Allow this young master to give you a piece of advice. It's best that you don't interfere. Ning Liangchun's gaze was murderous as he spoke in a cold and extremely threatening tone. What if I have to interfere? The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he lightly replied. His expression was very calm, but his eyes were like the abyss, as if hiding in extremely deep darkness, causing others to feel a strong sense of deterrence. Kid, do you know who I am? Ning Liangchun sensed the killing intent in Nye Tian's eyes, and his face couldn't help but sink as he said, This young master is acting on behalf of the Ning clan's enforcement hall. If you dare to obstruct this young master, then you're going against the Ning clan. A threat, a naked threat. Ning Liangchun directly used the entire Ning clan to threaten Nye Tian. I don't know who you are, and I don't know who you represent, Nye Tian said indifferently. All I know is that I'm Ning Ziyu's guard. Anyone who wants to touch her will have to ask the sword in my hand first. Buzz. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword of sky appeared in Nye Tian's hand. Instantly, the cry of the sword resounded in the air. It was clear and intense, like a thunderclap, resounding through the air, and it was deafening. Ning Liangchun's eyes couldn't help but shake when he sensed the powerful and fierce aura within the sword inside, and he couldn't help but cry out in astonishment. Obviously, he had not expected Nye Tian's sword intent to be so terrifying. Young Master Chun, I'll deal with him. Meanwhile, the gray-robed old man behind Ning Liangchun suddenly took a step forward and spoke in a low voice. In that instant, he actually felt a real threat from Nye Tian's sword intent. One had to know that he was a powerhouse of the Tianyi great sage. A heavenly charm holy disciple actually made him feel threatened. This was too strange. Moreover, he sensed a very strange aura from Nye Tian's body. This aura made him feel somewhat uneasy, so he decided to personally take action. Ning Liangchun was the young master of the main family after all. It would be bad if something were to happen to him. Elder Jiang, you don't have to do anything. A mere heavenly charm saint disciple can't do anything to me. However, Ning Liangshan stopped the gray-robed old man at this moment. He seemed extremely arrogant as he looked at Nie Tian in disdain. He said, "Brat, you're just a piece of trash from a primary saint world, yet you dare to oppose me? Don't attack me. You will regret it." Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he spoke coldly. That gray-robed old man by the name of Elder Jiang was simply too strong. Therefore, Nie Tian did not wish to really have a conflict with Ning Liangshan at this moment. But if Ning Liangshan insisted on making a move, then he would absolutely not hold back. "Brat, you're too arrogant." Ning Liangshan's eyes darkened as he immediately flew into a rage. His aura surged crazily and a terrifying power surged. The space was filled with an extremely sharp aura. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. It seemed that Ning Liangshan had used the power of his bloodline. It was extremely strange. "Brat, I only need one palm strike to defeat you." In the next instant, Ning Liangshan let out a furious roar as he struck out with his palm. In an instant, a horrifying palm shadow appeared as a terrifying pressure surged out from the void, crushing down on Nie Tian like tidal waves. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as his expression changed slightly. Afterwards, he took a step forward and his sword aura rose from the ground like a huge tree, directly dispersing the incoming palm shadow. Bang! Afterwards, a muffled sound rang out. Ning Liangshan was directly sent flying by the impact. He only managed to stabilize himself after retreating several dozen meters. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, making him look extremely miserable. How can this be? Ning Liangshan's eyes trembled as he let out a strange cry. His voice was extremely sharp. He was a heavenly mandate Saint Master. How could he lose to a heavenly mandate Saint Disciple? He didn't know that when Nie Tian was still a low-level Saint Disciple, he was already strong enough to fight against a heavenly mandate Saint Master. Now that Nie Tian was at the 8th level of heavenly mandate, he was strong enough to fight against a heavenly mandate Saint Master at the 5th level. Moreover, in such a narrow space, apart from the cultivation of a warrior, it was more about the warrior's martial body. Nie Tian's strength was at the 8th level of heavenly mandate, but the strength of his martial body was definitely not weaker than a warrior at the 8th level of heavenly mandate. Based on Nie Tian's strength, the strength of his martial body was simply like a monster. After all, there were several types of heaven-defying powers in his body that strengthened his martial body and made him extremely strong. Ning Mingyuan and the others were also stunned by the scene in front of them and couldn't react for a long time. Ning Mingyuan already knew that Nie Tian was a monstrous genius. But when he saw Nie Tian suppress Ning Liangshan head-on, he was still very shocked. "I told you, don't attack me, or you will regret it." Nie Tian's eyes were extremely gloomy and cold. "Brat, you're courting death." Ning Liangshan was thoroughly enraged at this moment. With a roar, he unleashed an even more berserk power from his body. Surges of bloodline power circulated around his body, gradually condensing into a gigantic black beast that was several hundred meters in size. Nie Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and his expression slightly changed when he saw this scene. The power that Ning Liangshan released was very strange. It seemed to be the power of the primordial spirit, but also the power of the bloodline. "Young Master Chun." Old Jiang frowned when he saw Ning Liangshan release the dark giant beast, seemingly dissatisfied. "A strange bloodline." At the same time, Ning Mingyuan looked at Ning Liangshan and his eyes trembled as if he had seen something very terrifying. He couldn't help but exclaim, "A strange bloodline." When Ye Tian heard this name, he could not help but be stunned for a moment as his expression changed slightly. "Brat, go to hell." Right at this moment, Ning Liangshan roared out as he made his move. The gigantic black beast behind him roared out as it pounced out ferociously. Instantly, the pressure it exerted caused the surrounding space to sink down as though it was about to collapse. Nie Tian stood in the same spot and instantly felt the ferocious aura coming at him. However, his face showed no fear. Instead, his lips twitched slightly as he slashed the longsword in his hand across the sky. The sword intent around him was instantly unleashed, forming a shadow of a sword that slammed toward the dark giant beast. Boom! The shadow of the sword was extremely violent, instantly emitting a powerful aura. The sword light traveled tens of thousands of meters and landed directly on the dark giant beast. A loud explosion could be heard in the sky as the space seemed to freeze for a moment. Following this, the dark giant beast was unable to withstand the power of the sword intent and shattered into pieces. Bang! In the next moment, the shadow of the sword whizzed out and directly pressed toward Ning Liangshan. After a dull thud, Ning Liangshan was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. When he landed on the ground, countless pieces of the bluestone floor were shattered. The eyes of the crowd trembled as they gasped. They were completely shocked by the scene before them and were completely speechless. Chapter 3610. Chapter 365. Chapter 365. 8 Abnormalities. After a long time, Ning Mingyuan and the others finally reacted. Their faces were filled with shock that could not be concealed. Ning Mingyuan did not dare to believe that Ning Liangshan, who had activated the 8 variant bloodline, was actually defeated by Nie Tian with a single sword just like that. Ning Liangshan's own strength was already at the first tier of the Heavenly Mandate realm. After activating the 8 strange bloodlines, even an ordinary warrior at the 3rd tier of the Heavenly Mandate realm would be no match for him. However, under such circumstances, he was defeated by Nie Tian with a single strike. Even more shocking was that Nie Tian's sword strike from before seemed to be a casual strike, and he hadn't exerted his full strength at all. This made one wonder just how terrifying Nie Tian's battle prowess was. Master Chun. After a short moment, old Jiang reacted and shouted loudly. His figure flashed and arrived by Ning Liangshan's side with extreme astonishment. Ning Liangshan was someone who had activated the 8 variant bloodline. His status in the Ning family was not low. If he were to die, it would be a huge problem. At this moment, Ning Liangshan's entire body was drenched with blood. He was like a pile of mud as he lay paralyzed on the ground. He struggled with all his might with the intention of standing up. However, he discovered that he was unable to stand up no matter what. His appearance was as miserable could be. Master Chun. Old Zhang's eyes shook, and then a strand of saint energy surged out and entered into Ning Liangshan's body. Only then did the latter feel slightly better, and he stood up shakily. However, at this moment, the way he looked at Nie Tian was filled with unconcealable fear. His eyes were trembling, and he didn't even dare to look at Nie Tian directly. Old man Zhang's face was gloomy. He suddenly raised his head, and his eyes were filled with killing intent as they locked onto Nie Tian. Don't worry, he won't die yet. Nie Tian smiled and said indifferently. Ning Liangshan's strength was pretty good. However, before him, he was completely unable to withstand a single blow. That sword strike earlier, if Nie Tian had used a little more force, Ning Liangshan would have died without a doubt. The reason why Nie Tian didn't kill Ning Liangshan was because he didn't want things to go to the extreme. Little brat, do you know who you've injured? Old Zhang's face darkened. His eyes were filled with cold intent, and he asked coldly. He attacked first. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. I warned him not to attack me, but he didn't listen. I can't just stand there and let him kill me. Elder Zhang's face darkened as he said, Brat, do you know that I can kill you right now just because you injured a member of the Ning family? Is that so? Nie Tian faintly smiled. His eyes flickered as he said, Then what are you waiting for? You. Old Zhang's expression changed, and he was momentarily speechless. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be so smart and see through him. Nie Tian's face was indifferent, a faint smile on his lips. He had long noticed that old Master Jiang had no intention of making a move. If Elder Jiang really wanted to kill him, he would have done so long ago. There was no need for him to wait for such a long time. However, Nie Tian did not understand why Elder Jiang did not attack him. It was as if this expert was afraid of something. Indeed, Elder Jiang was afraid of something, so he did not make a move. The sword intent that Nie Tian unleashed just now made him fearful. He concluded that Nietion's identity was not simple, and there might be a powerful force behind him. Lan Zhuiying and Ing Sangxiong, who were standing behind Nietion, were also extraordinary. The two of them were very cautious in front of Nietion. This made Elder Jiang even more worried. Because of this, he did not attack Nietion directly. "Brat, I won't pursue the matter of you injuring young Master Chun. However, you're not allowed to interfere with the Ning family's business," Elder Jiang said to Nietion coldly after thinking for a while. "That won't do." Nietion chuckled. He turned to look at Ning Ziyu and said, "I'm still Miss Ziyu's bodyguard. I must ensure her safety." Looking at Nieton, Patriarch Zhang's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. He did not expect Nietion to be so insatiable. After a moment of pondering, Patriarch Zhang said in a deep voice, "I promise you that nothing will happen to Ziyu." Once again, he compromised with Nietion. Nietion frowned and couldn't help but glance at Ning Mingyuan. It was reasonable for him to protect Ning Ziyu. However, if he forcefully interfered with Ning Mingyuan's business, it would be too much. "Mr. Nietion, thank you for protecting my daughter. I can take care of my own business," Ning Mingyuan stepped forward and said when he saw Nietion's dilemma. Nietion's gaze froze, but he did not say a word. "Father, I won't let them take you away." Ning Ziyu stepped forward all of a sudden. Her beautiful eyes flickered and she said firmly, "Young lady, it's not up to you." Elder Zhang's expression sank as he said coldly. He had accompanied Ning Liangchun to the 7th cultivator of True Virtues branch to bring Ning Mingyuan back to the law enforcement hall. Ning Ziyu could be spared, but Ning Mingyuan had to follow them back to the law enforcement hall. Ning Mingyuan frowned, and his gaze was extremely gloomy. He knew that once he entered the Ning family's law enforcement hall, he would not have a good time regardless of whether he was guilty or not. He would most likely die there. However, Ning Ziyu looked at Elder Jiang and said solemnly, "I have the 8th strange bloodline." "What did you say?" Elder Jiang's gaze froze. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. "I have the 8th strange bloodline," Ning Ziyu said word by word. "Young lady, the 8th strange bloodline is the supreme bloodline of the Ning family. Anyone with the 8th strange bloodline can enter the main family directly. If you joke about this, I can kill you on the spot." Old Jiang looked at Ning Ziyu and said in a deep voice. His murky eyes were filled with murderous intent. "I'm not joking." Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes trembled. Following that, her delicate body slightly trembled. Suddenly, a strange power was released and surged around her body. It was actually filled with an aura of nothingness. Following that, a shocking scene appeared. Ning Ziyu's figure actually disappeared in the void. She really disappeared. She disappeared into thin air. This, Nietion's gaze froze. His expression could not help but change. He exclaimed in his heart. His mouth was wide open, but he could not say a word. He did not expect such a strange bloodline to exist in this world. Moreover, after Ning Ziyu's figure disappeared, her aura also disappeared. Even with Nietion's perception ability, he could not sense Ning Ziyu's existence. However, Nietion knew that Ning Ziyu must be right in front of him. It was just that he could not see or sense her. At this moment, he finally understood why Ning Ziyu could escape from the wolf slave farm, even though she was not very strong. Elder Jiang was also stunned. His pair of old eyes trembled, and he could not say a word for a long time. The others, including Ning Mingyuan, were also stunned. Chapter 36:11. Chapter 366. The first genius moments later, Ning Ziyu's figure appeared once again. She was standing at the same spot, unmoving. However, her face was pale and her forehead was covered in sweat. It was obvious that activating the 8 variant bloodline had taken a lot out of her. "Miss Ziyu, when did your 8 variant bloodline awaken?" At this moment, Mr. Jiang had calmed down a little. He looked at Ning Ziyu with a passionate gaze. "When I was 6, Ning Ziyu nodded and replied calmly. 6 years old. Mr. Jiang's expression suddenly changed. He froze once again and was speechless for a long time. Awakening the 8 variant bloodline at the age of 6. In the entire Ning clan, there were less than 5 people who could do this. At this moment, Mr. Jiang finally realized that the young lady standing before him was a peerless genius that the Ning clan had not seen in tens of thousands of years. You? Ning Liangchun looked at Ning Ziyu and his eyes trembled. He wanted to say something, but he was too frightened to say anything. He never expected Ning Ziyu's bloodline talent to be this terrifying. His 8-variant bloodline had only awakened when he was in his 20s. Compared to Ning Ziyu, who had awakened the 8-variant bloodline at the age of 6, it was like comparing a snake and a chicken to a dragon and a phoenix. Miss Ziyu, I will now test your bloodline. After a long while, Mr. Jiang calmed down and took out a jade talisman that was as white as snow. He said, Miss Ziyu, release the 8-variant bloodline now. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes flickered. She extended her palm and released the power of the 8-variant bloodline into the jade talisman. The moment the power of the bloodline surged into the jade talisman, the white jade talisman sensed it, and its color changed from red to orange, then yellow, then green, and it did not stop. Every time the color of the jade talisman changed, Mr. Jiang's eyes trembled. In the end, the jade talisman turned from white to dark purple. Mr. Jiang's face froze as if he had received a huge blow. He was petrified and did not react for a long time. Purple, purple. Ning Mingyuan, who was watching from the side, looked at the dark purple jade talisman. His eyes trembled in shock and his face froze as well. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Ning Ziyu's bloodline talent was this powerful. Purple represented the strongest of the 8-variant bloodlines. This is impossible, impossible, absolutely impossible. Ning Liangchun looked at the dark purple jade talisman and cried out loudly in shock. He seemed to have gone mad, and his entire state was abnormal. Ning Ziyu's 8-variant bloodline was of the purple rank. There was probably no one in the entire Ning family who possessed such a terrifying bloodline power. Elder Jiang, isn't my 8-variant bloodline very strong? Ning Ziyu looked at Elder Jiang and asked in a puzzled manner. She did not know whether old Master Jiang's reaction was normal or abnormal. And Elder Jiang finally reacted. He nodded and said, Miss Purple Rain, your 8-variant bloodline is the strongest that I has ever seen. If you remember correctly, there were only 2 people in the entire Ning family whose 8 abnormalities bloodline had reached the blue level. However, it was a far cry from Ning Ziyu's purple bloodline. He could not believe that the young girl in front of him was actually the person with the strongest bloodline talent in the entire Ning family. Miss Purple Rain, follow I back to the main house now. Elder Jiang calmed down a little and said excitedly after a while, What about my father? Ning Ziyu frowned and her beautiful eyes flickered. Lord Ning Mingyuan and your family will all return to the main house. Elder Jiang said excitedly, Does my father still have to go to the law enforcement hall? Ning Ziyu could not help but glance at Ning Mingyuan and asked worriedly. Even now, she still didn't understand just how strong her bloodline talent was. Of course not. Old Man Jiang laughed and said, Miss Violet Rain, don't worry. After you arrive at the main family, the patriarch will personally see you. As for Lord Ning Mingyuan's matter, I believe that the patriarch will not mind. The Ning family's #1 bloodline genius. Even if her father had made a grave mistake, the master would let him off the hook with just a word from her. Moreover, Ning Mingyuan did not do anything wrong at all. It was all Ning Liangchun's doing behind the scenes. Previously, Ning Liangchun was very talented and was valued by the family. Thus, Elder Jiang turned a blind eye to it. However, it was different now. With Ning Ziyu's talent, she would definitely become an influential figure in the Million Treasure Chamber in the future. Therefore, her words carried real weight. Thank you, Elder Jiang. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes trembled as she thanked him joyfully. Elder Jiang, this. Ning Liangchun's face darkened when he saw this scene. He looked at Elder Jiang speechlessly. He never expected the situation to take a turn for the worse and become like this. Ning Liangchun, you better pray that Lord Ning Mingyuan will not pursue the matter with you. Otherwise, you could just wait for your death. Elder Jiang said with a dark and cold expression. Ning Liangshan's eyes trembled as he sat on the ground with an ashen face. Ning Mingyuan's expression was dark at this moment. His gaze moved between Ning Liangshan and Ning Zifeng, and his entire being seemed extremely cold. Lord Ning Mingyuan, how do you want to deal with these two? Elder Jiang asked directly. He knew that Ning Liangshan's matter would definitely not be covered up after returning to the main Ning family. He did not want to be implicated in any way. Therefore, it was best to settle Ning Liangshan's matter here. Uncle, don't kill me. I don't want to die. Ning Liangshan's eyes trembled as he pleaded on the ground. Father, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Ning Zifeng's face was also pale as he pleaded bitterly. Ning Mingyuan raised his head and looked at Ning Ziyu. The latter shook her head slightly. It was obvious that she did not want to kill Ning Liangshan and Ning Zifeng. Zilin, Ning Mingyuan suddenly shouted after thinking for a moment. Then, Ning Zilin, who was behind him, stepped forward. Destroy their Yuan meridians and make them guard the Ning family. They are not allowed to step out of the Ning residence for the rest of their lives. Ning Mingyuan said with a dark and cold expression. Yes. Ning Zilin replied and walked to Ning Liangshan and Ning Zifeng's side. Without any hesitation, he destroyed their Yuan meridians. When Yetian saw this, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, but he did not say anything. He had to admit that Ning Mingyuan's methods were not bad. He punished Ning Liangshan and Ning Zifeng and saved their lives at the same time. However, Ning Liangshan and Ning Zifeng had become ordinary people. They would not have a good life in the future. Miss Ziyu, let's go back to the main house now. At this moment, old Jiang looked at Ning Ziyu with a burning gaze. He could not wait to bring Ning Zifeng back immediately. Old Jiang, I want to stay here for a few days. Let's leave in 3 days. Ning Ziyu's beautiful eyes flickered as she nodded. All right. Although old Jiang was a little disappointed, he still nodded. Tian was not in a hurry, so he stayed in the Ning residence for a few days. Ning Mingyuan arranged a unique courtyard for the three of them. The environment was elegant and very comfortable. What exactly is the power of the Ning family's 8 variant bloodlines? In the room, Tian frowned and looked puzzled. He was still thinking about the strange scene from before when Ning Ziyu's figure disappeared into thin air. Chapter 36:12. The Net of the Sacred World, Primordial Bloodline? Tian's eyes narrowed, and his expression changed when he heard this name. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, rumor has it that the all-heaven sacred world was not like this a long time ago. Instead, all the sacred worlds merged together to form a complete world. This complete sacred world is the original ancient sacred world, also known as the primordial world. Later on, the primordial world experienced a massive sacred world quake. The entire world collapsed and slowly became the current all-heaven sacred world. Is that so? Tian furrowed his brows, and his expression changed once again. It was hard to imagine what kind of power could cause a sacred world quake in the primordial world. Tian still did not know how big the all-heaven sacred world was. However, he could imagine that the entire all-heaven sacred world was unbelievably vast from the tiny 7th sacred world of cultivators. Ghost Emperor, just how many sacred worlds are there in the all-heaven sacred world? Tian could not help but ask as his eyes trembled. I don't know. Unexpectedly, the Ghost Emperor shook his head and said, the all-heaven sacred world is infinitely vast. For a very long time, it was thought to be a boundless world. Currently, there are no less than 10,000 known sacred worlds. Aside from that, there are still countless sacred worlds hidden in the dark domain that have yet to be discovered. 10,000. Tian's expression flickered as his pupils constricted. He could not imagine that there were 10,000 sacred worlds in the all-heaven sacred world, and this did not include the ones that had yet to be discovered. He did not dare to imagine just how big the all-heaven sacred world was. It said that less than 1/100th of all the saints' worlds in the saints' world are known to exist. Most of the saints' worlds are in the obscurity and have yet to be discovered. The Ghost Emperor's voice rang out again with a bitter smile. Tian was stunned. His eyes trembled, and he was speechless for a long time. He did not dare to imagine just how big the all-heaven sacred world was. The vastness of this world made him feel a hint of panic. After a while, Nyetian became cold and asked, "Ghost Emperor, what kind of power is this primordial bloodline you speak of?" The Ghost Emperor smiled and returned to the main topic. The all-heaven sacred world was transformed from the primordial world, and it's rumored that there were 9 supreme bloodlines of the world in the era of the primordial world. They were born from the world, and they were known as the primordial bloodlines. Hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Nyetian couldn't help but frown in confusion. What kind of bloodline power could be born along with heaven and earth? Any power in the world comes from the heavens and earth. The Ghost Emperor frowned, and his eyes flickered as he said, "The 9 primordial bloodlines were born together with the heavens and earth. They represent the heavens and earth, so it wouldn't be wrong to call them the bloodlines of the heavens and earth." Nyetian's eyes flickered as if he understood. Could the 8 strange bloodlines be one of the 9 great primordial bloodlines? Yes, very likely. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, "I actually felt threatened when I saw the little girl's 8 strange bloodline. The 8 strange bloodline is connected to the heavens and earth, and it's full of transformations." The little girl was able to use the 8 strange bloodline to merge with time and space and even hide her aura. Such a heaven-defying bloodline power must be the primordial bloodline. Nyetian frowned, a speechless expression on his face. It turned out that the Ghost Emperor was only guessing and wasn't certain that the 8 strange bloodline was the primordial bloodline. However, one thing was for sure. The 8 strange bloodline was extremely powerful. Nyetian. The Ghost Emperor's expression suddenly sank as his eyes flickered. "Your Monarch Chun might also be the primordial bloodline." Monarch Chun, the power of the Dawn Wolf. Nyetian's eyes flickered as he was startled. He could feel that the power of the Dawn Wolf was similar to the power of a bloodline. After merging with it, it could directly increase the aptitude of his martial body. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded as if he wanted to say something, but he hesitated and didn't say it. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He smiled and didn't ask too much. Whether the 8 strange bloodline and the power of the Dawn Wolf were the primordial bloodline or not was only the Ghost Emperor's guess. He couldn't confirm it yet, so there was no point in thinking about it. When Nyetian was strong enough in the future, he would naturally understand the primordial bloodline. For the next 3 days, Nyetian cultivated in his room. Recently, his strength had been increasing rapidly. Although his martial body could keep up, he still needed to cultivate more, stabilize his realm, and comprehend the power of heavenly charm. 3 days later, Nyetian and the others arrived at the Ning residence's main hall. Today, Ning Ziyu and the others would follow Elder Jiang to the Ning family's main residence, while Nyetian and the others would go to the Qinquan sect. The Qinquan sect was not in the 7th cultivator's sacred world, but in the mid-rank sacred world, the Zongyun sacred world. As for Ning Ziyu, she was going to the top-notch heavenly path holy realm. Nyetian was very confused. How could they go from the 7th cultivator of true cultivators to other holy realms? Moving between holy realms relies on the net of the holy realm. The Ghost Emperor guessed Nyetian's doubts. He smiled and said, "The net of the holy realm is a huge space-time net that exists between the holy realms. It is formed by countless space-time passages. Warriors basically rely on the net of the saints to travel between the saints' realms." "So that's how it is," Nyetian smiled and said, "Since there's the net of the holy realm, it's much simpler." Then he suddenly thought of something and asked, "Since the net of the holy realm can allow people to travel between holy realms, it should be very difficult to be discovered, right?" The net of the holy realm is very comprehensive now. It has completely covered all the known holy realms. The Ghost Emperor smiled and said, "The holy realm's warriors have been exploring the net of the holy realm for a long time, and it is very mature now. The entire net of the holy realm is controlled by the most powerful organization in the holy realms. Heavenly Tao, Sacred Pavilion." Nyetian's eyes narrowed when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. He had already heard of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion before he entered the Holy Realm. He knew that it was a very powerful force. Not only did it control the Holy Realms, but it also controlled the realms and planes beneath the Holy Realms. Nietian had even seen the people of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion with his own eyes. The net of the Holy Realm connected every single Holy Realm in the Holy Realms. The heavenly Tao sacred pavilion naturally had to firmly control such an important thing. Yes, the Ghost Emperor nodded and smiled. It seems that you have a deep impression of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. He smiled and did not say anything else. Next, Nietian and the rest left the Ning residence in Ning City, heading for the nearest net of the Holy Realm. The net of the Holy Realm had several net nodes in almost every Holy Realm. Some even had dozens of them. 3 days later, they arrived outside an ancient city. It was the net of the Holy Realm. After they entered the city, they went straight to the huge square in the center of the city. At this moment, the square was filled with people waiting to enter other holy realms. Nietian saw a huge formation floating in the air above the square. It was extremely huge, like a small city. Within the formation, there was an extremely dense space-time aura. Visible space-time passageways were arranged in a complicated and irregular pattern. Even through the formation, Nietian could still feel the powerful space-time aura. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed. His eyes trembled as he stared at a ball of light in the center of the formation. Chapter 36:13. Chapter 368. Chapter 368 Space. Time Scar. The sudden strange feeling made Nietian frown, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Within his body, the 4-star mark within the star power seemed to be stimulated by some kind of power. It suddenly became berserk, constantly releasing terrifying impacts. Immediately, he felt as if every inch of his body was about to be torn apart in an instant. A terrifying pain spread throughout his body, causing Nietian's expression to turn extremely unsightly. His face turned incredibly pale as cold sweat poured down his face. Nietian, what's wrong? Lanjing stood by Nietian's side, and her expression couldn't help but change when she saw the latter's reaction, and she asked nervously, I'm fine. Nietian's brows were tightly knitted and his face was taut, almost revealing a ferocious expression. He endured the sharp pain and said, as the 4-star Scar Dark Seal became more and more violent, the tearing sensation in his body grew stronger. He felt that every inch of his flesh, every bone, and every meridian in his body was tearing and burning, as if he was going to turn into ashes in the next moment. Lan Zhuiying took a step forward and supported Nietian. Her delicate face became even more nervous, and she was momentarily speechless. Nietian didn't look like he was fine at all. In fact, he looked like he was in deep trouble. Nietian. Ing Sangxiong also noticed that something was wrong and shouted, what kind of power is inside his body? At that moment, Ningxiu walked over and looked at Nietian with trembling eyes, as if she had seen something very terrifying. She let out a cry of astonishment. Not only did the 8-variant bloodline in her body allow her to possess strength that far surpassed that of other martial practitioners of the same level, it also allowed her perception to far surpass that of others. At this moment, he sensed an extremely terrifying power within Nietian's body. It seemed to be awakening, like a fierce beast that had been sleeping for a long time. The next moment, it would directly devour Nietian. Almost at the same time, Elder Jiang also exclaimed in surprise. He looked at Nietian, and his expression froze. He was speechless. Among everyone present, his cultivation was the highest, and his perception was second only to Ningxiu. He could also sense the terrifying power in Nietian's body. He could imagine how much pain Nietian was suffering at this moment. He didn't even dare to believe that with Nietian's cultivation, he was able to withstand such a terrifying force. The power he sensed even made him feel threatened. At this time, Nietian was already drenched in cold sweat. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and he looked very frightening. However, his eyes were still sharp as he stared at the core of the formation in midair. Just what exactly was that ball of light? Why did it cause the fourth star mark to suddenly become berserk? After a long time, Nyation felt the restlessness in his body slowly weaken, and the fourth star mark calmed down. He let out a long breath of turbid air and calmed down. His complexion improved a lot. Lan Juing looked at Nyation. Her beautiful eyes flickered with a strange light as she asked nervously, "Nyation, are you all right?" "Everything's fine now," Nyation said with a calm smile. The others looked at Nyation in confusion. They didn't know what just happened. At this time, Nyation looked at Elder Jiang and asked, "Elder Jiang, the formation in the sky is the net of the sacred world, right?" "Yes." Elder Jiang nodded. He looked at Nyation with a surprised expression and said, "That formation is the extension of the net of the sacred world in the seventh cultivator's sacred world. The sacred array master protected it with a formation and didn't allow others to get close." Nyation's eyes sank as he pointed at the ball of light and asked, "What is that ball of light in the center of the formation?" Elder Jiang was stunned for a moment before he said, "That's a space-time mark. It said that the net of the sacred world can connect to all the sacred worlds because of this thing." Upon hearing this name, Nyation's expression flickered. "Space-time fissures? I don't know what a space-time mark is either. I've only heard that it's a kind of space-time power. When the ancient world collapsed, space-time marks covered all the sacred worlds, and the net of the sacred world was formed by countless space-time marks." Elder Jiang said in a deep voice. He looked at the space-time mark with a trace of respect and fear. Nyation nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Next, everyone lined up outside the net. They waited for close to a day before it was finally their turn. At the entrance of the formation, 2 guards glanced at Nyation and the others go and asked coldly, "Where are we going?" Elder Jiang replied with a faint smile, "Top sacred world, the heavenly way sacred world." "Top sacred world." One of the guards was stunned. He glanced at Elder Jiang and the others and said with a disdainful attitude, "Old man, do you know how much it costs to go to a top sacred world per person?" Nyation frowned. He didn't expect a guard to be so arrogant. However, these guards weren't weak. They were actually at Heavenly Charm Stage 5. After all, this was the net of the sacred world. It wasn't strange that the Heavenly Way Sacred Pavilion valued this place. "I know." Elder Jiang wasn't angry. He said indifferently, "A top sacred world costs 10,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals per person. In addition to the 2 of you, it'll be 11,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals per person." "Oh," the guard frowned and said, "Old man, you're quite knowledgeable. However, you're wrong this time. A top sacred world costs 50,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals per person." 50,000. Old Jiang frowned and couldn't help but frown as he exclaimed, "From elementary sacred world to top sacred world, it had always been 10,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals. Why did the price suddenly increase? Moreover, it had increased by 5 times to 50,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals." Nyation was also taken aback, and his face darkened. He didn't expect that traveling between sacred worlds would cost so much. 10,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals was a huge sum of money. One must know that when Nyation first came to the sacred world, he only spent a few hundred supreme grade Saint Crystals to buy a rank 3 sacred array scroll from the auction house. But now, they were only using the net of the sacred world to travel to other sacred worlds. The cost was staggering. It was hard to imagine how much money the Heavenly Way Sacred Pavilion earned from the net of the sacred world every year. Most importantly, the price of traveling had increased from 10,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals to 50,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals. There were more than 100 people from the Ning clan here. In total, they would have to fork out 5 to 6 million supreme grade Saint Crystals. Even for a chamber of commerce, such a large number was still very shocking. The people from the Ning clan didn't look too good. "Sir, it's usually 10,000 supreme grade Saint Crystals. Why did the price increase suddenly today?" Elder Jiang's eyes were dark, and he was obviously furious. However, He suppressed his anger and asked in a deep voice. Chapter 36:14. So what? Old thing, the price today is 50,000 supreme grade Saint crystals. Together with our commission, it's 55,000 supreme grade Saint crystals per person. If you think it's too expensive, come back another day, the guard said coldly as he looked at Elder Jiang arrogantly. You? Elder Jiang's face sank. His anger rose as he clenched his fists tightly, but he couldn't say a word. They had walked for 3 days to get here and queued up for an entire day. Now the guard was asking him to come back another day. How could he not be angry? What about me? The guard sensed Elder Jiang's anger, but he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he became even more arrogant and said provocatively, Old thing, you better think it through. You know very well what kind of person I am. You're digging your own grave if you attack me. Elder Jiang frowned. His face was extremely gloomy, but he didn't make a move. The guard's strength was nothing, but he was the guardian of the sacred world net, and he represented the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. No one had ever dared to attack someone from the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Old geezer, you either pay up now or get lost. The guard glared at him with a pair of dead fish eyes and growled in a low voice, looking even more arrogant. I'll pay up, Elder Jiang said after hesitating for a long time. To the myriad treasures chamber of commerce, a few million supreme grade Saint crystals were nothing. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to a super prodigy. Although it was a little unjust to pay a few million supreme grade Saint crystals, it was still comforting when he thought about how the Ning clan had a super bloodline prodigy. Not bad. You're very sensible. The guard chuckled. He looked at Elder Jiang with even more contempt. Elder Jiang's face was gloomy. He didn't say anything and turned around to signal Ning Mingyuan to pay. However, Ning Mingyuan frowned. He didn't look too good. What's wrong? Elder Jiang looked at Ning Mingyuan and asked with a frown. I don't have enough money. Ning Mingyuan's face stiffened. Elder Jiang's face sank. He didn't expect this to happen. The Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce was one of the 2 largest financial groups in the entire all-heaven sacred world. Ning Mingyuan was the president of the 7th Cultivator of Virtues branch, yet he couldn't even afford a few million top-grade Saint crystals. Old man Jiang, before I came here, I left most of my money to the family, so I only have 1 million or so top-grade Saint crystals with me. Ning Mingyuan frowned and said in a deep voice. He, Ning Ziyu, and the others will go to the main family. Naturally, they wouldn't bring too much money with them. Instead, they would leave most of their money to their current family. Pauper, hurry up and get lost. When the guard heard Ning Mingyuan's words, his face immediately darkened and he reprimanded him. Old man Jiang's face instantly turned extremely gloomy. If he wasn't afraid of the Heavenly Dao Sacred Pavilion, he would have killed the guard in front of him with a single palm strike. Even trash like you want to go to Peak Saint World? What a joke. The guard looked at Elder Jiang and immediately mocked. A bunch of country bumpkins, hurry up and scram. Elder Jiang, Ning Mingyuan, and the others all had unsightly expressions. The blood in their bodies seemed like it was going to surge in reverse. Don't you just want money? At this moment, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Within the calmness, there was a trace of coldness. Yes, I want money. The guard raised his eyebrows and looked coldly at the silver-haired young man in front of him. He said, Little Silver, are you going to pay for them? Nie Tian's face darkened. A golden talisman card appeared in his hand, and he directly threw it to the guard. He said, Is that enough? The guard caught the talisman card and checked it with his divine sense. His expression couldn't help but change. He was completely dumbfounded. His mouth was wide open, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. He didn't expect that the ordinary-looking Nie Tian could take out so much money in one go. The golden talisman card was the Saint Crystal Talisman card that was commonly used in the Saint's world. There were more than 30 million supreme grade Saint Crystals in the card. Old man Jiang, you guys can leave. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured for Elder Jiang and the others to leave. The reason why he was so rich was obviously thanks to the heavenly wolf of the wolf slave farm. The 30 million supreme grade Saint Crystals were all thanks to him. Many thanks. Elder Jiang glanced at Nie Tian and nodded, The Ning family will return the money. With that, he led Ning Mingyuan and the others into the array. Ning Ziyu was the last to leave. She couldn't help but turn around and look at Nie Tian a few times. She was clearly very reluctant to part with him. "We will meet again." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said to Ning Ziyu. "Yes." Ning Ziyu nodded heavily, but her eyes were clearly moist. "Hurry up." The guard was a little impatient and growled directly. Only then did Ning Ziyu wave at Nie Tian and enter the array. Following that, the people in the array arranged for Elder Jiang and the others to enter a space-time tunnel. Their figures quickly disappeared. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched when he saw that everyone from the Ning family had left. He smiled faintly. "Brat, where are you going?" At that moment, the guard raised his eyebrows and looked at Nie Tian provocatively. "Intermediate Sacred World, Vertical Cloud, Sacred World," Nie Tian said with a nod. "Very well. I'll keep this Saint Crystal Talisman card for you. You may enter." The guard nodded and said with a chuckle. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. There were more than 30 million Supreme Grade Saint Crystals in his Saint Crystal Talisman card, while the Ning family only spent about 5 million Supreme Grade Saint Crystals to go to Sky Path Sacred World. This guard actually wanted to keep the Saint Crystal Talisman card, which was equivalent to charging Nie Tian 25 million Supreme Grade Saint Crystals for the trip. Meanwhile, Nie Tian and the others were only going from a primary sacred world to an intermediate sacred world. Under normal circumstances, each of them would only need 1,000 Supreme Grade Saint Crystals, so 3 of them would only need 3,000 Supreme Grade Saint Crystals. This guard's actions were no different from that of a bandit. "Outrageous! You're clearly robbing us." Ing Tsang Xiong, who was behind Nie Tian, couldn't stand it anymore and roared furiously. "So what if I'm robbing us? What do you do to me?" The guard was extremely arrogant. He didn't even try to defend himself as he yelled back. "You?" Ing Tsang Xiong's face darkened. He was speechless for a moment. He didn't expect this little guard to be so arrogant. However, at this moment, Nie Tian waved his hand and gestured for Ing Tsang Xiong to leave. Then, he took a step forward with a cold smirk on his face. He looked at the guard strangely and said, "Are you sure you want to keep my Saint Crystal Talisman card?" The guard couldn't help but tremble when he sensed the gloominess in Nie Tian's eyes. His heart trembled inexplicably, but in the next moment he laughed arrogantly and said, "I'm sure." "Very well." Nie Tian smiled faintly as the corner of his mouth twitched. Then he took a step forward and raised his arm, grabbing at the guard. Chapter 36:15. Chapter 36:10. Chapter 36:10, threatening with a formation. "What do you want to do?" The guard suddenly felt a violent force rushing towards him. His expression changed, and he cried out in alarm. But before he could finish his words, his entire face was covered by a big hand. "Since you don't want the respect I gave you, then I'll take it from you." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a cold smile as he spoke coldly. A sharp sword essence gushed out from his hand and strangled the void. In an instant, the air was filled with the smell of blood. Then his figure moved, and one of his hands was like a steel pincer, grabbing the guard's neck tightly. At this moment, Ing Tsang Xiong, Lan Zhuiying, and the people behind them saw an extremely bloody scene. The guard's face had become a bloody mess, as if his entire face had been torn off. Even his facial bones were broken and mixed with the flesh and blood. It was a nauseating sight. When Nie Tian struck out with his palm, just now, he used sword essence to tear off the guard's face. Just as he said, he wanted the guard's face. This! Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled violently, and they were extremely shocked. They all gasped and were completely speechless. No one expected that the seemingly calm Nie Tian would be so bloody and ruthless when he attacked. What shocked everyone even more was how Nie Tian dared to attack. One must know that the guard was from the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Even if his status in the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was the lowest, he was still a martial artist of the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion and was protected by the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Yet, Nie Tian actually dared to attack him in front of everyone. This was a direct provocation to the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. In the eyes of the crowd, Nietion was simply a lunatic. Nietion Yu, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sangxiong were stunned for more than 10 seconds before they finally reacted. They stared at Nietion in shock and did not know what to say. Although the two of them were very angry just now, they would never directly attack the guard, let alone use such a ruthless method. Nietion tearing off the guard's face was equivalent to tearing off the face of the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Could it be that Nietion did not know how powerful the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was? Of course, Nietion knew how powerful the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was, and he had seen it with his own eyes. But the situation just now had reached a point where he could not tolerate it. Since he could not tolerate it, he had to act. The other guard was scared out of his wits by the sudden turn of events. Only now did he come to his senses. He looked at Nietion in shock, his lips trembling, but he couldn't utter a word. He had clearly sensed that Nietion was only at the 8th level of Heaven Yin. Why had he suddenly burst forth with such terrifying power? And the guard who had his face torn off was at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm. If it was a normal battle from afar, the guard might still have a chance to exchange a few blows with Nietion. However, at close range, Nietion's sudden attack was not something he could resist. Not to mention a 5th level Heavenly Mandate Saint Master. Even a peak 9th level Heavenly Mandate Saint Master might not be able to gain an advantage against Nietion's martial body at close range. Nietion's martial body had long been at the monstrous level. Ugh. The guard's entire face had been torn off, and his neck was tightly gripped by Nietion. At this moment, he wanted to speak, but he was completely unable to. At this moment, dozens of black-clothed warriors appeared in the air. Each of them had an incomparably powerful aura, like a violent dark cloud, their aura oppressing everything. It's the Heavenly Law Guard. When everyone saw the dozens of black-clothed warriors, their eyes couldn't help but tremble as they exclaimed in unison. The Heavenly Law Guard, the guardian of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. Nietion's eyes slightly narrowed. His divine sense swept across the dozens of Heavenly Law Guards, and he couldn't help but frown. These dozens of Heavenly Law Guards were actually 9th level Heavenly Mandate Saint Masters. 9th level Heavenly Mandate Saint Masters were the pinnacle of strength in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. The Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was indeed powerful. Even the warriors guarding the sacred world of 7 cultivators were so terrifying. Who dares to behave so atrociously in the net of the sacred world? At this moment, a Heavenly Law Guard took a step forward. His powerful aura caused the void to tremble, as if it was about to collapse. His eyes were incomparably cold as he stared at Nietion with a murderous look. Nietion frowned, looked at the Heavenly Law Guardian, and prepared to tell him what had just happened. I didn't want to kill this guard. He was the one who caused trouble time and time again. I had no choice but to attack him. Nietion frowned, looked at the Heavenly Law Guardian, and prepared to tell him what had happened. Boom! However, before he could speak, the Heavenly Law Guard's body trembled. Suddenly, an extremely violent aura was released, rolling like the sea. The powerful aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. Nietion's eyes slightly narrowed. He suddenly felt a terrifying aura pressing down on him. It was rolling and violent, as if it was going to destroy everything. Boom! Nietion frowned and took a step forward. A wave of sword aura soared into the sky, directly breaking through the aura pressing down on him. It was no longer possible for a warrior of the 9th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm to suppress him with aura. The Heavenly Law Guard frowned and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He clearly didn't expect Nietion to be able to break through his aura pressing down on him. It seems that the people of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion are all the same. You're all unreasonable, Nietion frowned and said in a deep voice. If that's the case, there's no need for me to explain too much. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying sword aura suddenly surged outside his body. Suddenly, the entire array was impacted and trembled. Young man, what are you trying to do? The Heavenly Law Guard's eyes trembled. he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He growled and his eyes turned red. To his surprise, he sensed an aura of sword intent from Nietion that made even him shudder. He couldn't believe that this silver-haired warrior was only of the 8th level of the heavenly mandate realm. I know that you don't care about this guard's life, but you definitely care about this array. Nietion's lips twitched, and he said coldly, I just want to leave this place. If you let me go, everything will be fine. If you want me to stay, I'll destroy this array first. The heavenly law guard expression suddenly changed. He stared at Nietion and said, Young man, you still don't know what level this array is at. Do you think you can destroy it with your strength? You can try and see. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched. Immediately afterwards, the power of the sword formation surged out of him and condensed into a huge sword shadow around him. The tip of the sword shadow pointed at the space-time rift at the center of the grand spell formation. When the heavenly Tao guardian saw this, his eyes trembled, and he let out a cry of astonishment, unable to utter a single word. Chapter 36:16. Don't be impulsive. The heaven Tao guardian's eyes were trembling with an unpleasant expression. His gaze toward Nietion was filled with murderous intent and unconcealable fear. As Nietion had said, he did not care about the guardian's life or death, but he had to protect the formation in front of him. Guarding the Grand Array was exactly what he was responsible for. If the formation was destroyed, even if he managed to kill Nietion, all the Heaven Tao Guardians present, including him, would have a hard time escaping death. However, Nietion had indeed found the weakness of the grand spell formation. Besides, a strong aura of the formation was emitting from Nietion's body. The Heaven Tao Guardian did not doubt that Nietion had the ability to destroy the formation. What's going on? At this time, everyone looked at Nietion and the Heavenly Law Guardian with puzzled expressions. At this moment, anyone could see that the Heavenly Law Guard was truly threatened by Nietion. Could it be that Nietion really had the ability to destroy the grand spell formation? I'll leave now. Don't be impulsive. As the crowd was confused, Nietion let out a calm smile and signaled Lan Zhuiying and Ing Sangxiong to enter the formation. The two immediately entered the formation after collecting their thoughts. They could not believe that Nietion dared to threaten the Heaven Tao Guardian. Bang! That Heavenly Tao Guard did not move, but the dozens of Heavenly Tao Guards behind him moved at the same time. In an instant, a powerful aura was unleashed, and a terrifying explosion resounded in the void. Don't be impulsive. Nietion frowned his eyebrows and said in a cold tone. The silhouette of the swords around him shuddered, as if they were about to be launched at the next moment. Back off! The Heaven Tao Guardian's eyes widened as he uttered a deep roar. It was obvious that he was extremely nervous. He knew that if Nietion made a move, he wouldn't be able to protect the space-time rifts, and the grand spell formation would collapse in an instant. Once the formation was destroyed, all of them would be sentenced to death due to their negligence. At this time, he had no choice but to let Nietion go. Thank you. Nietion looked at the Heavenly Guardian and smiled, then signaled Lan Zhuiying and Ing Sangxiong to continue walking forward. The martial artists in the Grand Array obediently brought them to a space-time passageway and let them leave. The corners of Nietion's mouth twitched slightly, and he could not help but lock his eyes on the space-time scar. At this moment, he could clearly feel that the 4th star trace dark seal in his body had become a little more active. However, this time, it was not as violent as the last time. Instead, it was in a more gentle and active state. At this moment, Nietion really wanted to take the space-time scar away. However, once he took the space-time scar, it would cause the entire array to collapse. Then, he might not be able to leave this place. Could it be that the space-time scar is the thing that unlocks the 4th star scar dark seal? His eyes trembled slightly as he guessed in his heart. Nietion, let's go. At that moment, Ing Sangxiong spoke rather nervously. Clearly, he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Nietion had already thoroughly offended the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. The longer he stayed here, the more danger he would be in. Let's go. Nietian nodded and looked at the heavenly guardian from afar. The heavenly guardian's face was gloomy, and his eyes were almost bloodshot. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only watch as Nietian left. Nietian threw the guard whose face had been torn apart, then stepped into the space-time passageway. He, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sangqiong disappeared in an instant. Only a few seconds after the three of them disappeared did the crowd react. They were extremely shocked and could not believe what they had seen. Who could believe that a holy disciple in the 8th tier of heavenly charm could tear apart the guard's face of the net of the saints, threaten the heavenly guardian, and then swagger away in the end? At that moment, everyone looked at the heavenly guardian who was standing in the air. He was obviously the leader of this batch of heavenly Tao guardians. At that moment, the leader's face was gloomy, and his body was surging with a violent aura. He was like a fierce beast trapped in a cage, about to go berserk in the next moment. "Leader, you must uphold justice for me. That kid tore apart my face. He is provoking the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion and slapping the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion's face." After a while, the guard whose face had been torn apart ran out. His face had recovered a little, and he came to the leader of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion and cried. The heavenly Tao guardian's face darkened. His eyes suddenly turned and locked onto the guard's body like a sharp blade. "Leader, that kid deserves to die. If we don't kill him, where will the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion put its face?" The guard's eyes trembled. Then he cried and said, "The one who deserves to die the most is you." However, right at this moment, the eyes of the commander of the heavenly Tao guards turned cold. Then, he let out a low roar and took a step forward. A berserk energy was released and directly pressed toward the guard. Bang! The next moment, before the guard could react, his body trembled and blood exploded on the spot. The air was instantly filled with the smell of blood. The crowd was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their faces changed, and their eyes were wide open, unable to react for a long time. The leader of the heavenly Tao guardians had a murderous look on his face. He was breathing heavily, like an enraged lion. Although he did not know why Nietian attacked the guard, he could roughly guess the reason. No one would attack the people of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion unless they were forced to the brink. These guards relied on the reputation of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion and looked down on everyone. They were extremely arrogant and wanted to walk with 3 legs. Now, there was finally a tough guy who didn't respect the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. This guard still had the guts to run over and shout. The leader of the heavenly Tao guardians had nowhere to vent his anger, so he decided to kill him. "Lord Commander, what should we do?" After a long time, a heavenly law guardian cautiously walked over and probed. "Find out who that kid is. I want him blacklisted by the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion." The leader of the heavenly Tao guardians fell silent for a while, then roared like a volcano eruption. He looked like a wild beast that had gone mad. The crowd looked at the leader of the heavenly Tao guardians and couldn't help but shiver. If Nietian was blacklisted by the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion, he would be hunted by the people of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. This also meant that he would never have a peaceful day in the all-heaven sacred world. Fortunately, Nietian was only blacklisted and not on the heaven-defying list. Otherwise, the people who were hunting him would be real heavenly Tao experts. However, with Nietian's strength, it was a miracle that he was blacklisted by the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. At the same time, 3 figures stood in the void of the Zongyun sacred world. They were Nietian, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sangqiong. At this moment, the 3 of them didn't look too good. They were as pale as a piece of paper. They had just traversed through the sacred world and crossed countless space-time boundaries. They were under tremendous space-time pressure, so it was normal for them to look pale. "Are you guys all right?" Nietian glanced at Lan Zhuiying and Ing Sangqiong and asked with a faint smile. "We're fine." The 2 of them shook their heads and smiled. Their complexions slowly returned to normal. Boom! However, at this moment, a violent explosion suddenly came from the ground, as if the ground had been blasted apart by a terrifying force. Chapter 36:17. Splitting the Earth, what's going on? Nie Tian stared at the mountain range in the distance. His eyes flickered as he exclaimed. He had never seen such a terrifying scene. A mountain range that spanned for thousands of miles was torn apart, just like that. The scene was too shocking. What kind of force was it that was so terrifying that it was able to tear apart such a huge mountain range? Rumble bang bang bang. At this time, the continuous mountain range was still being torn apart. The earth rumbled endlessly, rocks flew everywhere, and turbid waves surged into the sky. A huge crack that was thousands of miles wide appeared on the ground, like a scar on the earth. What kind of force is this? Why is it so powerful? This was clearly the first time Lan Zhuing had seen such a terrifying scene, and her beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble as she exclaimed in shock. Bang! As soon as she finished her sentence, a tremendous force shot up into the sky from the ground, creating thousands of waves like a storm. It was as if the sky was going to be torn apart. Dodge it! Ing Sanqiong's eyes flickered as he screamed and immediately retreated. Nie Tian and Lan Zhuing instantly realized what was going on. They moved at the same time, and like two streaks of light, they shot towards an area of the void. However, the speed of the three of them was still a little too slow. Bang! 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 The terrifying force was extremely terrifying. It almost spread across the sky, causing the sky to be filled with a terrifying roar. The moment the force exploded, three muffled sounds were heard. Nie Tian and the other two were sent flying 10,000 meters away. Nie Tian steadied himself and arrived next to Lan Zhuing and Ing Sanqiong. He asked nervously, "Are you guys all right?" "We're fine." Ing Sanqiong's expression was gloomy. His face was extremely pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his lips. Lan Zhuing was also injured, even more so than Ing Sanqiong. She was the last one to react. However, the two's injuries were not too serious, at least not fatal. Nie Tian's martial body was strong. Although he was attacked, he was not injured. However, he was still shocked in his heart. That power was too terrifying. If the three of them were to be hit head-on, they would definitely be instantly killed by that wild power. What is this power? Nie Tian frowned. He could sense that the power within the storm was even more terrifying than the space-time turbulence. It could kill and annihilate everything. Ing Sanqiong's eyes darkened slightly. He could not help but tremble as he said in a deep voice, "It's the power of the fission of the earth." Earth fission power? Nie Tian had never heard of this kind of power. His eyes darkened, and he exclaimed in surprise. Boom! Rumble! Boom! And at this moment, an even more berserk energy was released from the cracks in the ground, rushing towards the sky. It was as if numerous dragons had drilled out from the ground, stirring up the sky. It was a scene of chaos, as if doomsday had arrived. Nie Tian and the other two looked at the scene before them with shock written all over their faces. It was hard to believe that such a terrifying power could be released from underground. After a long time, the restlessness on the ground slowly subsided, and the world returned to normal. What a terrifying power! When the dust dispersed, Nie Tian could not help but sigh in amazement as he looked at the terrifying crack on the ground that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The crack on the ground was like a deep gorge. It was thousands of kilometers long and dozens of kilometers wide. It looked like a terrifying scar had appeared on the ground. Such a scene was extremely impactful, causing one to shudder with fear. Even saint rulers and saint emperors might not be able to do such a terrifying power to directly tear apart a mountain range that stretched for thousands of kilometers in such a short amount of time. Ing Sanqiong, you just said that this is the power of the fission of the earth. What do you mean? Nie Tian looked at Ing Sanqiong and asked with a deep voice. Ing Sanqiong was also very shocked at the moment. He took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. He said, I'm not familiar with the fission of the earth. I've only heard of it before, and it's my first time seeing it. I only know that the fission of the earth is a phenomenon of the world. My teacher said that the fission of the earth is the anger of the earth. It represents the earth's dissatisfaction towards humans. Nie Tian's eyes could not help but darken slightly when he heard what Sanqiong said. He disagreed. He did not really believe in these mysterious things. What he believed was that all power had a source. When the earth fissure occurred just now, he deliberately sensed that there was a very powerful force moving underground, as if there was a huge beast lurking in the endless depths of the earth. The cultivators of the Zongyun sacred world are familiar with the fission of the earth. I often heard people mention it when I was young, but I never thought that the fission of the earth would be so much more terrifying than I imagined it to be. Sangxiong calmed down and said with a smile. The corner of Nye Tian's lips twitched, but he did not say anything. In his eyes, the fission of the earth was definitely not something common. There must be a terrifying secret hidden behind it. Nye Tian, let's go. At this moment, Sangxiong smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Nye Tian nodded with a smile. No matter what the fission of the earth was, it had nothing to do with him. It was not something he needed to care about. The three of them did not stop and immediately set off for the Qingquan sect. The Qingquan sect was located in one of the three major cities of the Zongyun sacred world, Qingquan City. As one of the 5 organizations behind the Heart of the Sky, the Qingquan sect was one of the peak organizations of the Zongyun sacred world. However, due to the ownership of the Heart of the Sky, the 5 organizations were in constant internal strife. Over the past few million years, the Qingquan sect had retreated from the peak Zongyun sacred world. Now, they were holed up in the middle rank Zongyun sacred world. According to Sangxiong, the Qingquan sect had once been glorious. Even in the peak Zongyun sacred world, they were an extremely powerful organization. But now, the Qingquan sect declined more and more. In the end, they could only hide in the Zongyun sacred world. Compared to the Qingquan sect, the other 4 organizations were not much better. Even the strongest, the Heaven Martial Association, could only barely establish themselves in the peak Zongyun sacred world. Due to the internal strife, the 5 organizations would all be removed from the peak Zongyun sacred world. People could not help but sigh over this outcome. 5 days later, Nye Tian's group arrived outside a majestic ancient city. The huge city walls were several thousand meters tall, and there was a stone sword on each side of the city gate. They were actually over 10,000 meters tall, like 2 giants that guarded the ancient city. A sharp presence flowed through them, making them look extremely sharp. Nye Tian, this is Qingquan City. Sangxiong smiled faintly and pointed at the ancient city below. His eyes were filled with pride. He had grown up in Qingquan City, so he had special feeling for the huge city that was famed for its swords. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He expanded the senses of his soul and immediately sensed the tremendous sword intent that flowed through the sky above Qingquan City. The vastness seemed endless. Chapter 36:18. Cosmos Sword Formation. Nye Tian looked at the Qingquan City, his eyes trembling slightly. Under the protection of such a huge sword formation, the Qingquan City was incomparably sturdy. Moreover, under the protection of the sword formation, it was very beneficial for swordsmen to cultivate. At such a young age, Sangxiong already had the sword Dao cultivation of the 9th heaven of sword rhyme. It probably had a lot to do with him living in the Universe City. Nye Tian, the sword formation that protects Cosmos City, is called the Heaven and Earth Sword Formation. It was built by the first sect master of the Cosmos sect, along with 1,000 of the most outstanding swordsmen and dozens of Saint Spell Formation Grandmasters of the Cosmos sect. Sangxiong knew that Nye Tian was trying to sense the Cosmos Sword Array. He smiled and said, "The Cosmos Sword Array took 60,000 years and is a rank 8 sacred array. It's enough to defend against the attacks of the Sky Martial Divine Ancestors." Furthermore, when the Cosmos Sword Array was completed, the first-generation sect master and 1,000 swordsmen and dozens of sacred array masters sacrificed their blood to the array, fusing their sword Dao well into the array and protecting the Cosmos City with their lives. Once the Cosmos Sword Formation is attacked, it can instantly release 10,000 sword shadows. Each sword shadow has the power to kill a heavenly tribulation Saint King expert. Sangxiong's expression was solemn as he spoke to this point. His eyes were filled with reverence. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked. He hadn't expected the Cosmos Sword Formation to come about like this. The first-generation sect master 1,000 swordsmen, and dozens of holy formation grandmasters actually sacrificed their lives to build this formation. It was truly admirable. Inside the Cosmos Sword Formation was their flesh and blood, their will, and the things they had to protect for their entire lives. However, the power of the Cosmic Sword Formation was extremely great. It could actually release 10,000 sword blurs in an instant, and every single one of them had the power to kill a heavenly tribulation saint ruler. In other words, the Cosmic Sword Formation could instantly kill 10,000 saint kings. Such terrifying power was simply unfathomable. With the protection of the Cosmos Sword Array, Cosmos City was simply an impenetrable fortress, let alone the fact that no one in the Cloud's Urge sacred world could pose a threat to the Cosmic Sword Formation. Probably not even a lot of experts from Peak Saints worlds could. At this moment, Lan Zhuiying's eyes flickered, and she said indifferently, "Perhaps the first sect master felt that the Qianquan sect owed him something when he moved the Qianquan sect to a mid-level sacred world, so he sacrificed his life to protect the sword formation." When Ying Sangxiong heard what she said, he could not help but glance at her. He was obviously a little angry, but he did not say anything. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Although Lan Zhuiying's words weren't pleasant to hear, they made some sense. For a powerful sect to relocate from a peak sacred world to a middle sacred world, it was already the sect's fault. As the leader of the sect, it was normal for the sect leader to feel guilty. "Nie Tian, let's enter the city." At this moment, Ying Sangxiong smiled and said to Nie Tian, Nie Tian nodded and followed Ying Sangxiong into the city. Under Ying Sangxiong's lead, the three of them entered the city successfully. After entering the city, Nie Tian sensed the presence of sword intent in the air and gained a better understanding of the power of the Cosmic Sword Formation. Even a swordsman with mediocre talent would probably be able to increase their strength very quickly if they bathed in the sword intent. Most of the people in the surroundings were swordsmen, but their expressions were rather strange. It was as if they were under some sort of pressure, causing them to walk slowly. The streets of the Cosmic Sword Formation were slightly different from other cities. They were much wider, and the streets were not in a straight line. Instead, they were shaped in a special way, like a maze. Nie Tian could not help but wonder why the streets were built like this. Not only did it take up more resources, but it was also inconvenient to walk on it. However, a while later, Nie Tian's expression changed slightly. As he walked on the streets, he actually felt a faint pressure of the sword appear and press down on him. "What's going on?" Nie Tian frowned, and his expression changed. "Amazing." At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice was suddenly heard. He exclaimed, and his eyes were trembling, shining brightly. "What's wrong?" Nie Tian was stunned and could not help but be surprised. Could it be that the Ghost Emperor had discovered something extraordinary? This street is actually a sword pattern. The Ghost Emperor's eyes darkened slightly, and he said in surprise, "Sword pattern." Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. The next moment, he realized something, and his expression changed in shock. At this moment, he realized that the winding street under his feet was like some kind of talisman. It turned out that this strange street was actually a sword pattern. In other words, the entire street was actually a part of the sword formation. The street was covered with sword patterns. No wonder Nie Tian felt a strong pressure of the sword appear at this moment. Moreover, the surrounding swordsmen also looked solemn. They must have been under a very strong pressure of sword. Why is there a pressure of the sword? At this moment, Lan Zhuiying also felt that something was wrong and said with her beautiful eyes, "This is a major feature of the Cosmos God City. The entire street is a part of the Cosmos God Formation. When the swordsmen walk on the street, the formation will automatically sense the swordsman's sword will and slowly release the pressure of the sword. It will train the swordsman's sword will without causing any harm to them." Ying Sanxiong smiled faintly and calmly. It was obvious that he was already familiar with the pressure of the sword. As expected, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and he smiled faintly. The Cosmos God City was more mysterious than he had imagined. No wonder he saw that although the surrounding swordsmen were young, all of them had basically reached the realm of sword charm. Tian and the others continued to walk. About half an hour later, they arrived outside a magnificent giant palace. The shape of the palace in front of them was strange. From afar, it looked like a giant sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. Outside the giant sword, there were countless smaller buildings that looked like sword towers. They were like stars surrounding the moon, surrounding the largest giant sword. Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes flickered. She was obviously shocked by the palace in front of her. Tian, Miss Lan, this is where the Qinquan sect is located, the Cosmos Sword Palace. Ying Sanxiong glanced at Tian and Lan Zhuiying and said with a proud smile, "What a magnificent Cosmos Sword Palace." Tian's eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but exclaim. He had never seen such a strange and majestic palace before. "Let's go." Ying Sanxiong smiled faintly and took a step forward, ready to enter the Qinquan Palace. Boom! However, right at that moment, a terrifying sword aura suddenly whizzed out of the Universe Sword Palace, raising terrifying waves in the void. Like a mad beast, it pounced towards Tian and the others. Tian's eyes widened in shock. Chapter 36:19. Chapter 36:14. Chapter 36:14. Zhang Kuang, Kun Long Boom. Terrifying power surged out of the void, causing rumbling sounds to echo out as it charged towards Tian and the others with a murderous aura. "Watch out!" Ying Sanxiong's eyes trembled, and he suddenly felt the killing intent and growled. Tian frowned and stepped out. The sword of sky appeared in his hand, and he slashed out. The shadow of the sword whizzed like a dragon and took the attack head-on. Boom! In the next moment, the two extremely strong forces collided. Suddenly, there was a roar in the air as if the sky and earth were about to collapse. Then, a terrifying force rolled out and spread in all directions. Bang! Immediately after, there was a muffled sound, and Tian's figure was forced back dozens of meters. Wherever his feet passed, the bluestone floor cracked. After he steadied himself, there was a wound on his wrist, and blood stained half his arm. That bloody wound was caused by that force. From this, it could be seen how strong that force was. Seeing that, Ying Sanxiong and Lan Zhuiying stepped forward at the same time and looked at Tian anxiously. "Tian, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Tian nodded slightly, and then looked at the sky above the Cosmic Sword Palace. There stood a figure in black. He stood there like a sharp sword, and the sharpness of his aura surged in the air, as if he was about to tear the sky and earth apart. The person who attacked just now was him. Huh. In the next moment, Tian's eyes narrowed. He saw that the man in black was very young, and looked even younger than Ying Sanxiong. But his strength was not weak at all. His martial art cultivation had reached the fifth heaven of the heavenly mandate realm, and his swordsmanship had reached the fifth heaven of the oracle realm. At such a young age, he had such strength. This person was undoubtedly a top genius. At that moment, the man in black had a frosty expression, and his eyes were extremely cold. He stared at Tian like a sharp blade, as if he was about to kill in the next moment. "Ying Longshao, what are you doing?" At this moment, Ying Sanxiong looked at the black-clothed cultivator and growled coldly. Clearly, he was furious. Of course, he knew this black-clothed swordsman. The latter was one of the two strongest swordsmanship geniuses of the younger generation in the Qinquan sect. He was known as Kunlun. In the Qinquan sect, the two strongest swordsmen of each generation would receive a special title, and they would be known as the Qinquan swordsmen. In Ying Sanxiong's generation of swordsmen, Ying Longshao was one of the two cosmic swordsmen, and his title was Kunlun Long. As for the other Qinquan swordsman, his name was Zhu Zia, also known as Qinquan Storm. Qinquan sect and Qinquan sect were the two strongest swordsmen of this generation. Ying Sanxiong's talent and strength were also very strong among the younger generation, but compared to the Qinya Kunlong, he was much weaker. Ying Sanxiong did not know why Ying Longshao would suddenly appear and attack Tian. "On behalf of the Qinquan sect, I'm here to welcome the Master of the Sky," Ying Longshao said in a low voice, with a sense of oppression and threat. Although he said, "Welcome," he definitely did not think so in his heart. If Nietion's reaction was a little slower, or if his strength was a little weaker, he would have died a horrible death. "Welcome." Lan Zhuing frowned and said coldly, "The way the Chinquan sect welcomes people is really special." Nietion's eyes were gloomy, and he did not look too good. How could he not tell that Long Shao was not here to welcome him, but to show him off? However, he was very curious. He had just arrived at the Chinquan sect, but how did the people of the Chinquan sect know that he had arrived? Sangxiong did not inform the people of the Chinquan sect in advance. If he did so, he would definitely tell Nietion. Nietion guessed that there should be something in the Chinquan sect that could sense the heart of the sky. It was precisely because of this that the people of the Chinquan sect knew that he had arrived. He is the master of the sky. If he can't even take a blow from me, what right does he have to stand here? Long Xiao's eyes were like a venomous wolf's as he stared at Nietion sinisterly and said coldly. His tone was insufferably arrogant. Long Xiao, do you know that you almost hurt Nietion just now? Sangxiong was obviously very angry, and he said in a low voice, "So what if I hurt him?" Long Xiao smiled coldly and said arrogantly, "Do you think the master of the sky can't be hurt? If he can't even get past me, what right does he have to be the master of the sky? Nietion has merged with the heart of the sky, so he is the master of the sky." Sangxiong's eyes darkened, and he shouted in a low voice, "Huh?" Long Xiao's face darkened, and his eyes flickered strangely. He then sneered and said, "Sangxiong, it seems like you've already acknowledged his identity as the master of the sky. Did you lose to him?" "I did lose to Nietion." "So what?" Sangxiong's face stiffened, and he said coldly, "So you lost. No wonder you became someone's dog." Long Xiao's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "You buffed." Sangxiong's eyes trembled. He did not expect Long Xiao to say that about him. He was just about to refute when he felt a surge of blood in his body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Spitting blood? Long Xiao sneered again when he saw this and said, "Sangxiong, I used to think that you were a genius. But looking at you now, you don't even deserve to be called a scum." Sangxiong's eyes narrowed and anger surged in his body. He felt the blood in his body become even more violent. "Don't talk. Be calm." At this moment, Nietion walked to Sangxiong's side and sent a stream of sword essence into the latter's body. Of course, he knew that Sangxiong was spitting blood, not because he was narrow-minded, but because he was angry and his blood was out of control. Sangxiong had once been possessed by Lang Chun. His strength had increased too quickly, and his realm was unstable. It was difficult to control his blood in the first place. It was not surprising that his blood was out of control in a moment of anger. "I'm fine now." Sangxiong let out a long sigh of relief after being soothed by Nietion's sword essence. His complexion looked much better. Nietion nodded slightly and looked up at Long Xiao. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "You're here to welcome me. That sword attack just now was just a test, right? I want to know how you're going to welcome me next." It was obvious that Long Xiao did not use his full strength in the sword attack just now. He was only testing Nietion. Nietion was more concerned about what he was going to do next. "Nietion, you should know that many people in the Chinquan sect don't like to see you, the master of the sky." Long Xiao's eyes were extremely gloomy. He locked his cold gaze on Nietion and said, "If you want to be acknowledged by the Chinquan sect, I, Long Xiao, will be the first obstacle you have to pass." "Oh, is that so?" Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He did not deny it. Long Xiao seemed to think too highly of himself. He claimed to be the spokesperson of the Chinquan sect. Nietion felt that Long Xiao could not represent the Chinquan sect. Chapter 36:20. Chapter 36:15, A Shocking Attack. Long Xiao, are you crazy? Sangxiong's eyes darkened when he saw Long Xiao about to attack Nietion again. "Nietion, take 3 strikes from me." However, Long Xiao had gone crazy at this moment. His eyes were filled with a fervent, murderous intent as he said in a loud voice, If you're still alive after 3 strikes, I'll admit that you're the ruler of the sky. Kill." With these words, he let out a ferocious roar. Like a ferocious beast, a long black sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed it out. A terrifying sword shadow instantly appeared, crushing down towards Niet Tian like a mountain. "This lunatic!" Ing Sangqiong's eyes trembled as he exclaimed. He did not expect Ing Longxiao to actually kill Niet Tian. Either way, Niet Tian was the ruler of the sky. If he were to die in the hands of the Qingquan sect, would the other 4 factions let the matter go? If Niet Tian were to die, there was no doubt that the 5 factions would start a civil war once again. "Back off!" Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he immediately sensed a monstrous murderous intent surging toward him. He let out a roar and ordered Ing Sangxiong and Lan Zhuing to back off. 9 limits of the starry sky. Destruction of the sun. In the next instant, the sword of the sky in his hand slashed across the sky. Sword intent burst out from his body like a tsunami as the sword shadows soared into the sky. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. The 2 sword shadows collided with one another in the sky like 2 giant dragons. A terrifying explosion was heard as the 2 sword shadows collided with one another. They collided, devoured, and destroyed one another. Waves of terrifying sword intent surged into the sky, as if they were going to devour the heavens and earth. Bang, bang, bang. A moment later, 2 muffled sounds could be heard as Niet Tian and Ing Longxiao were knocked back at almost the same time. Niet Tian was knocked back tens of meters. The bluestone floor under his feet was left a few meters deep ravine. Ing Longxiao, who was in midair, retreated several hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. In a head-on collision, the 2 seemed to be equally matched. However, Niet Tian suffered some minor injuries, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. When Lan Zhuing and Ing Sangqiong saw this, their expressions changed. They looked at Niet Tian in shock and could not believe their eyes. They hadn't expected Niet Tian's strength to reach such a terrifying level. If they were the ones to resist Ing Longxiao's sword, even if they managed to block it, they would definitely be severely injured. Niet Tian, on the other hand, had only suffered minor injuries. More importantly, both of them knew that Niet Tian was far from revealing his true strength. At this time, Ing Longxiao's cold eyes trembled. He looked coldly at Niet Tian and exclaimed, Although he had gained the upper hand, he didn't feel happy at all. Instead, he was extremely shocked. Niet Tian's strength was far beyond his imagination. He couldn't believe that a swordsman who was only at the 3rd heaven of sword aura could block his sword. Regardless of whether he admitted it or not, his sword essence talent was far below Niet Tian's. The second sword, kill. In the next moment, Ing Longxiao roared once more, and then his figure flashed as he slashed with his sword. The sword intent in the sky surged like a storm. Its imposing aura covered the heavens and the earth as if it intended to obliterate everything. Roar! Then, the violent sword essence condensed into a black dragon in the void. It was tens of thousands of meters long. The huge body of the dragon rolled in the void and pressed down on heaven and earth as it charged at Niet Tian. Bloodline power. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He could feel the aura of the bloodline power. It seemed that Ing Longxiao had directly used the bloodline power. Niet Tian, watch out. Ing Sangqiong's eyes trembled violently, and he couldn't help but scream. Ing Longxiao was really a madman. He actually used the bloodline power. Sacred heaven-defying sword, unity of heaven and man, sacrifice of the sun. The corners of Niet Tian's mouth twitched as he spoke in a low voice. Instantly, his aura surged madly, and a terrifying sword aura shot up into the sky. Next, a sword shadow appeared, like a giant, supporting the heavens and the earth. The terrifying aura it exuded seemed to be able to resist everything. Boom! In the next moment, the black dragon and the sword shadow collided in the void. The void rumbled, and the heavens and earth seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Bang, bang, bang. PSSSD, PSSSD. Then the sound of explosions and ear-piercing roars rang out continuously in the sky. The collision between the two sword essences set off endless monstrous waves. At this moment, many spectators appeared in the surroundings. They were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled and they were speechless. Ying Longshao was a very famous swordsman in the Qinquan sect. Most people knew him and were very optimistic about his strength. But Nie Tian was only at the 8th level of heavenly rhythm and the 3rd level of sword rhythm. How could he fight against Ying Longshao head-on? Bang! At this moment, the black dragon and the sword shadow in the sky suddenly trembled and directly exploded, turning into a violent wave. Nie Tian's figure retreated again, and several wounds appeared on his body. Ying Longshao wasn't any better than him. He was directly pushed back 1,000 meters, and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Ying Longshao is injured. When the two of them stabilized themselves, everyone's focus was on the trace of blood at the corner of Ying Longshao's mouth. They all exclaimed in shock. It was hard to believe that Ying Longshao had actually been injured in this battle. Damn it! Ying Longshao stood in the sky and roared like a wild beast. The sword intent in his body surged crazily and was extremely violent. He didn't expect that, even after using the power of his bloodline, he still couldn't defeat Nie Tian. He even suspected that this swordsman in front of him was really only at the 3rd level of sword rhythm. The 3rd sword. Following that, Ying Longshao let out a low roar, and every single word he uttered was filled with killing intent. His eyes were scarlet red, and it was obvious that he had gone berserk. The 3rd sword won't be so simple. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Suddenly, he stomped his feet, and a huge pit appeared on the ground. His figure was already thousands of meters in the sky, facing Ying Longshao. Ying Longshao, since you dare to provoke me, then I won't be polite. Nie Tian's eyes were murderous and cold, not concealing his threat at all. Ying Longshao's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He could sense an extremely strong, threatening aura from Nie Tian. This aura made him very uneasy. Boom! At this moment, Nie Tian took a step forward. The sword intent in his body surged and circulated in the void. Then the sword intent in his body skyrocketed. His entire body was like a vortex of sword intent that suddenly erupted. How could this be? Ying Longshao looked at Nie Tian and exclaimed in shock when he sensed the sword intent aura in the latter's body. He simply couldn't believe that Nie Tian's sword Dao realm had actually improved in an instant. Archean Saint Soul. At the same time, in the void far away, a pair of hidden eyes stared at Nie Tian and could not help but murmur. It was obvious that the person was very shocked. Chapter 36:21. Lord of Qinquan Archean Saint Soul. That pair of hidden eyes stared at Nie Tian, feeling the sword aura around Nie Tian that was constantly increasing, and his eyes were burning with passion. He had never expected that such a young master of the sky would have Archean Saint Soul in his body. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly narrowed as if he had seen something extremely terrifying, and his face stiffened. He sensed that there were actually 2 Archean Saint Souls in Nie Tian's body. This discovery made him feel inexplicably excited, and his eyes widened so much that his eyeballs were about to pop out. It was the first time he had seen 2 Archean Saint Souls perfectly fused into a martial artist's body. He could not imagine how Nie Tian was able to fuse the 2 Archean Saint Souls so perfectly. Boom! At this moment, the sword aura around Nie Tian's body skyrocketed like a sword aura volcano that erupted in an instant. The terrifying sword aura seemed to be able to annihilate everything. His sword principal realm rose rapidly with the crazy eruption of the sword aura. Almost in an instant, he advanced from the 3rd heaven of sword aura realm to the 8th heaven of sword aura realm. The activation of the Sky Evolution Saint Soul and the Omniscient Saint Soul at the same time actually caused Nie Tian's sword principal realm to skyrocket by 5 levels. The power of the 2 Saint Souls seemed to have increased correspondingly with the increase of Nietian's strength. How is this possible? What did that kid do? How did his sword principle improve instantly? Everyone looked at Nietian in the sky with trembling eyes and screamed in shock. The shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. Lan Zhuiying and Ying Sangxiong were not too surprised by Nietian's performance. After all, they had seen Nietian's more heaven-defying moments. But at this moment, Ying Sangxiong's expression was very ugly. Looking at Nietian's stance, it seemed like he was not willing to giving Longshao the chance to unleash the third sword move. Nietian used 2 primordial sacred souls at the same time, clearly intending to kill Ying Longshao directly. When Nietian was at the 3rd heavenly layer of sword rhythm, he was already on par with Ying Longshao. Now that he had reached the 8th heavenly layer of sword rhythm, would Ying Longshao still be able to block his sword? It was precisely because of this that Ying Sangxiong's expression turned ugly. After all, Ying Longshao was the Qianquan sect's Qianquan swordsman. Although he wasn't a true expert in the Qianquan sect, he was the face of the Qianquan sect, a kind of symbol. If Nietian killed the universe swordsman, it would be a direct demonstration to the universe sect. In that case, it would be even more difficult for him to get the Qianquan sect to recognize his identity as the Lord of the Sky. Boom! At this moment, the sword intent around Nietian rumbled. The 2 primordial sacred souls had stimulated his sword intent to its limit, making him look like a huge sword that stood in the void. His sword aura was oppressive, as if even the heavens and earth had to bow before him. Ying Longxiao's eyes suddenly trembled. The arrogance from before was no longer there. It was replaced by unconcealable nervousness and fear. He had not expected Nietian to be able to elevate his sword intent to such a terrifying level in an instant. It was obvious that he had underestimated the Lord of the Sky in front of him. However, he had already bragged and looked down on Nietian with 3 swords. It was obviously impossible for him to retreat now. Fight! In the next moment, Ying Longxiao's face darkened, and a vicious look flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, the power of the bloodline in his body exploded, and streaks of violent sword intent surged out like rolling dark clouds, as if they were going to annihilate everything. Very well. The corner of Nietian's lips twitched as a strange light flashed in his eyes. His current strength had reached such a terrifying level that even he himself was a little surprised. Ever since he had leveled up, he had not fought a real battle. At this moment, he released the power of the 2 primordial sacred souls to test out his extreme combat strength. However, this was not his real goal. He had another, more important goal. Kill. At this moment, Nietian's eyes turned cold as he growled. Instantly, sword intent erupted from his body like a raging dragon. The void around him rumbled as if it was going to collapse at any moment. Ying Longxiao's eyes trembled, and his expression changed. His eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with despair. When Nietian's sword intent was released, he finally realized how terrifying Nietian was at this moment. At this moment, he understood that he was no match for Nietian at all. Boom! At this moment, a thunderous boom rang out in the sky as a gigantic sword shadow the size of a mountain appeared, rumbling with killing intent as it slammed towards Ying Longxiao. Ying Longxiao's eyes widened as he felt extreme despair at this moment. The aura of death shrouded his entire body. The crowd's eyes trembled violently as the shock in their hearts reached its peak. Unbelievable, Nietian was really going to kill Ying Longxiao. Stop! At the last moment, a deep voice echoed in the sky, followed by a powerful sword intent that descended from the sky. It was as gentle as the rain and as gentle as the wind. The moment it landed, it immediately dissolved the violent shadow of the sword in the air. The originally violent void became clear in an instant, as if nothing had happened. Finally willing to come out, Nietian stared at the sky with no sign of surprise on his face. Instead, his lips twitched slightly as he murmured. He had long sensed that there was a pair of eyes observing everything from high up in the sky. He had unleashed his ultimate sword intent to killing Long Xiao in order to force the person hiding in the void to come out. As expected, the person hiding in the void could not help but show himself. Nie Tian's eyes widened as he stared at the black-robed figure. He was deeply shocked by the latter's strength. The black-robed figure stood in the void like a mountain. The sword intent around him was not strong, as he was obviously trying to hide it. However, the aura of the sword intent was extremely terrifying. It was as powerful as the ocean and as sharp as a blade. It seemed like the surrounding void would collapse if the person moved. This person is definitely an expert from Saint Tianyi. He might even be a heavenly tribulation saint. Nie Tian's face sank as he exclaimed in his heart. He had only sensed the existence of the person hiding in the void, but he had not expected the person to be so powerful. Leader. At this moment, Longxiao's eyes trembled as he looked at the black-robed cultivator. He exclaimed in shock as his face turned extremely ugly. Leader. Sanqiong's eyes widened as he exclaimed in shock. Chapter 36:22. Hidden in the heart, Nie Tian looked at sect master Qianquan with a gloomy expression. He was very surprised that the dignified sect master Qianquan actually did such a thing as peeping in the dark. It was really beneath his status. He had to admit that sect master Qianquan gave him a very bad first impression. Lord Sect Leader. At this moment, the group of martial artists below bowed respectfully. Longxiao, how dare you? How dare you attack Lord Clear Heaven Master? Sect Master Qianquan's gaze swept across the crowd and then fell on Longxiao. His face suddenly darkened. With a low roar, a terrifying sword aura soared into the sky, stirring up the void. Boom! Suddenly, a wave of sword intent spread out in the void, shocking the crowd and causing them to retreat. Looking at Sect Master Qianquan's appearance, he seemed to be very angry and was about to attack Longxiao. Longxiao knows his mistake. Longxiao's eyes trembled and he immediately lowered his head, looking very nervous. How could he not know that if Sect Master Qianquan had not made a move, he would most likely be a dead man now? Don't do it again. Sect Master Qianquan's face darkened and he shouted in a cold voice. Then, the sword aura around him dissipated and the void regained its calmness. Nie Tian frowned as he watched from the side, a disdainful smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. With his experience, of course, he could see that Sect Master Qianquan was just acting. He put in enough effort on the surface, but he did not give Longxiao any real punishment. It was obvious that Sect Master Qianquan was just acting for others to see. To be more precise, it was for Nie Tian to see. Sect Master Changfeng pays respect to the Master of the Sky. At this moment, the Sect Master of the Qianquan sect suddenly took a step forward and bowed deeply to Nie Tian, saying respectfully, "This." Changfeng's sudden action stunned Longxiao and the crowd below. They exclaimed in surprise and were momentarily speechless. No one thought that Changfeng would actually bow to Nie Tian in front of everyone. Wasn't this a public declaration that he acknowledged Nie Tian's identity as the Lord of the Sky? Sect Master is too polite. Nie Tian stared blankly at Changfeng for a moment before replying with a faint smile. He had not expected Changfeng to suddenly make such a move. However, as far as he was concerned, Changfeng's actions were extremely pretentious. Although he did not understand Changfeng's character at all, the latter's eyes were dark and deep, as if there was an extremely deep darkness hidden in them, giving people a feeling that they were bottomless. The Lord of the Sky has come to the Qianquan sect in person, and I, Changfeng, failed to welcome you. Please forgive me for my rudeness, Lord of the Sky. Changfeng became even more courteous at that moment. He spoke indifferently in a very sincere manner, but at the same time, he looked somewhat terrified. Everyone was even more puzzled when they saw Changfeng's behavior. Changfeng had never been so humble even when the big shots of the other four great forces had come to the Qianquan sect. Although Nie Tian was the Lord of the Sky, his identity had not been recognized by the five great forces. Changfeng's current actions could not help but make people feel that he was expressing goodwill to Nie Tian in advance. What are you talking about, sect master? If you hadn't made a move just now, I'm afraid I would have been defeated by brother Ing Long Xiao, Nie Tian said in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. The humbler Ing Chongfeng's current attitude was, the more he felt that this person was unfathomable. He had seen too many shrewd people, but no matter how deep a person's heart was hidden, it would always be reflected in their eyes. Ing Chongfeng's eyes were very different from that kind of pure sincerity. Lord of the Sky must be joking. If I hadn't made a move just now, I'm afraid the one who would have been defeated would have been Ing Long Xiao. Ing Chongfeng was rather calm at that moment as he laughed heartily. Lord of the Sky is so young, yet you've cultivated your sword intent to such a pure level. You're indeed worthy of your identity as the Lord of the Sky. Nie Tian smiled and nodded, but didn't say a word. He really did not want to continue feigning civility with Ing Chongfeng. Everyone disperse. At that moment, Ing Chongfeng nodded and swept his gaze across the crowd as he said indifferently. The crowd nodded one after another and gradually dispersed. Lord of the Sky, follow me to the Universal Palace first, Ing Chongfeng said to Nie Tian with a faint smile. Nie Tian nodded and moved, following behind Ing Chongfeng in a very natural manner. Ing Long Xiao, Ing Sangxiong, Lan Zhuying, and the others also followed. Along the way, Ing Chongfeng asked Nie Tian some unimportant questions, to which Nie Tian answered calmly. Ing Chongfeng introduced the situation of the Universal Palace to Nie Tian. He seemed to be very enthusiastic and seemed to trust Nie Tian very much. Soon, the crowd arrived outside a grand hall. The magnificent ancient hall was like a sharp sword that was 10,000 meters tall, piercing into the sky. The Universal Palace was a sword Dao sect. All the buildings were related to swords and gave off a sense of sharpness. Nie Tian, you must be careful of this person. The Ghost Emperor reminded Nie Tian in a low voice when they were about to enter the Universal Palace. Nie Tian nodded and turned his gaze, pretending to glance at Ing Chongfeng. The latter seemed to have sensed it, but did not react. This person hides his murderous intent in his heart. The Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice and said nothing else. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. Hiding his murderous intent in his heart was exactly what Ing Chongfeng felt. Lord of the Sky, please. Ing Chongfeng bowed slightly outside the Universal Palace and gestured for Nie Tian to enter first. Lord of the Universal Palace, you're too kind. Just call me Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled faintly and walked into the hall. As soon as he stepped into the hall, he immediately sensed a formidable pressure coming from all directions, causing his knees to sink, causing his footsteps to become heavier. It seemed that the Universal Palace was shrouded by a very powerful sword intent, and the terrifying sword pressure spread to every corner of the hall. Ing Chongfeng glanced at Nie Tian and said with a smile, Lord of the Sky, the Universal Palace used to be the place where the previous lords of the Universal Palace cultivated. It is located in the core of the entire Universal City. The sword pressure is very strong, but don't worry. This sword pressure will not cause any harm to the swordsman. Oh, I see. Nie Tian smiled faintly and felt that the sword pressure had become much gentler. It seemed that there was a sword intent circulating in the void, and it had a nourishing effect on his sword intent. One could imagine that cultivating in such an environment would make it much easier for a swordsman to improve his sword Dao realm. Now, I've changed the Universal Palace into a place for swordsmen to cultivate. As long as you're an outstanding swordsman of the Universal Palace, you can cultivate in the Universal Palace. Ing Chongfeng smiled faintly and continued. Lord of the Universal Palace is very open-minded. Nie Tian smiled faintly and nodded. It must be said that Ing Chongfeng's decision to open the Universal Palace to anyone other than the Lord of the Universal Palace was indeed very good. Chapter 36:23. Chapter 36:18. Chapter 36:18. A brief. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Ing Chongfeng's words. He then smiled and said, I appreciate sect master's good intentions, but I'm not a swordsman of the Qingquan sect after all. Forget it. Ing Chongfeng seemed to have expected Nie Tian's refusal. He nodded with a smile and did not force it. On the other hand, Ing Longxiao and Ing Sangxiong were stunned, and they were unable to react for a long time. As members of the Qinquan sect, they naturally understood how difficult it was to enter the Qinquan palace to cultivate. Although the Universal Palace was open to all swordsmen in name, one had to obtain the approval of the Universal Gate Master in order to truly enter the Universal Palace. With Ing Sangxiong's talent, it was his first time entering the Universal Palace. It could be said that he had benefited from Ye Tian. As for Ing Longxiao, he only cultivated in the Universal Palace for 3 days. The moment Ing Changfeng opened his mouth, he allowed Nye Tian to come to the Universal Palace at any time. This was definitely a huge favor. Nye Tian, on the other hand, directly refused. At that instant earlier, Ing Sanxiong wished for nothing more than to stand out and remind Nye Tian how difficult it was to enter the Universal Palace. However, Nye Tian rejected him too quickly. He didn't even have time to remind him. Then, Ing Changfeng brought Nye Tian and the others to the main hall and gestured for them to take a seat. Nye Tian smiled faintly as his gaze swept across Ing Changfeng's body from time to time. He did not know why the latter had brought him to the Universal Palace. Lord Master of the Sky, you came in a hurry this time, so I didn't have time to prepare. Please forgive me for my lack of manners. Ing Changfeng took a sip of tea and looked at Nye Tian calmly as he apologized again. Sect Master is too courteous. Nye Tian forced a smile. Ing Changfeng's hypocrisy made him extremely annoyed. Lord of the Sky, you've just arrived at the sect of Heaven and Earth, so you're not familiar with everything here yet. Why don't you settle down for the time being? Ing Changfeng smiled faintly as he stared at Nye Tian with a strange glint in his eyes. Sure. Nye Tian smiled faintly and readily agreed. Anyway, he had nothing urgent to do now, so he might as well take a break in the Qinquan sect for a while. Although Ing Changfeng was eyeing him covetously, he assumed that Ing Changfeng would not dare to do anything to him since he was the Lord of the Sky. All right. Seeing that Nye Tian agreed, Ing Changfeng laughed and said to Ing Sangxiong, Ing Sangxiong, since you brought the Lord of the Sky here, he will stay in your sword palace for the time being. During this time, you can show him around the Qinquan gate. Yes. Ing Sangxiong stood up with an excited look on his face. He seemed very happy. In his opinion, Ing Changfeng had already accepted Nye Tian's identity as the Lord of the Sky. Then, Ing Changfeng did not waste any time and asked Ing Sangxiong to leave with Nye Tian, but left Ing Longxiao alone. After Nye Tian left the Qinquan palace, he followed Ing Sangxiong to the latter sword palace. Any swordsman in the Qinquan sect who had some talent or ability would have their own sword palace. Ing Sangxiong was very excited. Along the way, he brought Nye Tian around the Qinquan sword palace. After walking around for a long time, they finally arrived at his own sword palace. Nye Tian, this is my sword palace, the Firmament Sword Palace. Ing Sangxiong pointed at the sword palace in front of him and said excitedly, although it's a little shabby, we can make do with it. Looking at the Firmament Sword Palace in front of him, Nye Tian smiled faintly and did not say anything. In his opinion, the Firmament Sword Palace was not shabby at all. On the contrary, it was very majestic and almost comparable to a small palace in a realm. After a while, Nye Tian and the rest arrived at the main hall of the Firmament Sword Palace. Nye Tian, I really did not expect the sect leader to acknowledge you as the owner of the Sky sect so quickly. Ing Sangxiong sat on the main seat in the main hall and laughed heartily. I didn't expect it either. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he responded. Ing Sangxiong obviously did not see any clues. He thought that Ing Changfeng had already acknowledged Nye Tian. Lan Zhuiying sat opposite Nye Tian with a slight frown and did not say anything. Next, Ing Sangxiong arranged for Nye Tian and Lan Zhuiying to stay. After Nye Tian made the arrangements, he let Duanmu Lu and the rest out of the 9 extremities to cultivate in the Firmament Sword Palace. The entire Qinquan city was enveloped by the Qinquan sword formation. It was the best place for swordsmen to cultivate. However, the next half a month was very peaceful, which was beyond Nye Tian's expectations. Apart from cultivating, Nye Tian would give pointers to Duanmu Lu and the rest. He would also spar with Ing Sangxiong and Lan Zhuiying. Ing Changfeng did not appear for half a month. It was as though he had forgotten about Nie Tian. What is the sect leader doing? Why isn't he coming to see us? At this moment, Nie Tian and the rest were in the main hall of the Firmament Sword Palace. Ing Sangxiong grumbled with an ugly expression. There's no hurry. It's good to cultivate here. Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked calm. He had a feeling that Ing Changfeng was planning something. Could he be deliberately distancing himself from him to wear him down? However, it was really good to cultivate in the Firmament Palace. In just half a month, Nie Tian had a breakthrough in his sword principle realm. He had reached the 4th heaven of sword aura. As for Ing Sangxiong and Lan Zhuying, their martial principle realm was much more stable under the nourishment of the Qinkuan sword formation. Nie Tian, let's go to the Heaven and Earth Palace together tomorrow to look for the sect leader. Ing Sangxiong frowned and suddenly said to Nie Tian, why do we look for him? Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and smiled. Ing Sangxiong was stunned and was speechless. He did not know why he wanted to look for Ing Changfeng. At this moment, he also noticed that something was amiss. Although Ing Changfeng was very respectful to Nie Tian in public, it was just on the surface. He did not really acknowledge Nie Tian's identity. Moreover, Ing Sangxiong knew that the sect leaders of the 5 forces each had an important item related to the heart of the sky. Ing Changfeng had to give this item to Nie Tian to acknowledge Nie Tian. Don't rush. Let's wait. Nie Tian smiled faintly and was very calm. Actually, he was also very anxious. However, if Ing Changfeng did not look for him, there was no point in being anxious. Boom! At this moment, there was a sudden explosion in the void far away. Then, a sword aura soared into the sky like a dragon and rolled in the void. Nie Tian felt the aura of the sword intent in the void. His eyes turned gloomy and his expression changed. Then, he rushed out of the palace and saw a huge sword shadow standing on a strange peak in the distance. It was like a giant with a strong aura. And in that sword shadow, there was actually a person standing. Chapter 36:24. Qianya leaves seclusion outside the Sky Dome Palace. Nie Tian, Ing Sangxiong, and the others stared at the figure in the sky. Their eyes could not help but tremble. Although they were separated by more than 100,000 meters, Nie Tian could clearly feel the powerful sword intent aura contained within the sword shadow. The figure in the sword shadow was dressed in white and held a long sword in his hand. The light from the sword was dazzling, and he looked like a sword god that had descended to the world. Boom! At this moment, the sword shadow suddenly moved, directly rushing up to the 9 heavens. In an instant, the sky rumbled and the earth trembled. A huge wave of sword will appeared, spreading in all directions. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes, and his expression changed. This was the burst of sword intent when a swordsman made a breakthrough. Some swordsmen who were in seclusion could suppress their sword intents and release their sword intents the instant they broke through to a higher realm. At this moment, the sword will ripples formed by that swordsman in the void were extremely strong. This meant that he was extremely ambitious and wanted to break through to an even higher cultivation realm. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He took a step forward and charged up into the sky, getting closer to the swordsman. At this moment, he felt an even stronger fluctuation of sword intent. Meanwhile, the swordsman's sword momentum was soaring wildly. The 6th heaven of Oracle, Nie Tian exclaimed in surprise as he sensed the swordsman's realm. Judging from his figure, this swordsman was very young. He was in the 6th sky of the Oracle realm. At the next moment, a shocking scene happened. The swordsman's sword momentum skyrocketed, and his sword Dao realm also broke through. 7 heavens of Oracle, the 8th heaven of Oracle. Oracle, 9 heavens. Almost in the blink of an eye, the swordsman's sword realm advanced from the 6th heaven of Oracle to the 9th heaven. At this moment, the sword momentum of his entire body was still rising crazily. He's trying to break through to the realm of holiness. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He exclaimed in his heart, "This swordsman was indeed ambitious." He wanted to break through to the holy realm from the sixth sky of the Oracle realm. At this moment, many onlookers appeared in the surroundings, their eyes trembling as they looked at the swordsman. Clearly, they could tell what the swordsman was planning. Boom, boom, boom. The sword intent around the swordsman's body erupted madly, and his sword aura was like a tempestuous wave that struck ceaselessly, causing the surrounding space to rumble endlessly. However, after charging over a dozen times, his sword momentum began to weaken. Although he was ambitious, the result was not what he had hoped for. He failed and did not break through to the holy realm. A moment later, the swordsman's sword intent aura stabilized. His entire person was like a sharp sword, standing coldly in the void. At this moment, his face was very ugly. It was obvious that he was depressed because he could not break through to the holy realm. This person is so powerful. He can directly break through from the sixth heaven to the ninth heaven. Yet Tion's eyes slightly narrowed, and he was quite shocked. Zhu Zia is so scary. No wonder he's the universe swordsman. At this moment, the crowd finally reacted. They stared at the swordsman in shock and said his name. So he was Zhu Zia, who was equally famous as Ing Longxiao for the universe sword array and titled Qinya. It was obvious that his talent and capabilities were above Ing Longxiao's. So he is Zhu Zia. Nie Tian heard the crowd's discussion and the corner of his lips twitched. He had heard Ing Sangqiu mention Zhu Zia before, but he had never met him. He did not think that the first time he saw Zhu Zia, it would be in such a situation. After 3 years of isolation, I still cannot break through to the holy realm. In the void, Zhu Zia's eyes were downcast as he mumbled. His tone was filled with disappointment. Perhaps to others, the fact that he was able to directly break through from the sixth heaven to the ninth heaven was already very terrifying. But to him, this kind of breakthrough was far from enough. However, in the next moment, his gaze regained its sharpness. Like a sharp sword, his eyes revealed its sharpness. He was clearly not the kind of person who could not extricate himself from depression. His mentality was very good, and he was very confident in himself. He firmly believed that he could do better next time. This guy is not bad. Nie Tian saw Zhu Zia's reaction and said with a faint smile. He liked this kind of person who had perseverance and was optimistic. At least in terms of mentality, Zhu Zia was already hundreds or thousands of times stronger than other genius swordsmen. At this moment, Zhu Zia's gaze swept across the crowd and inadvertently saw Nie Tian. He frowned slightly, and his expression changed slightly. It seemed that he was very interested in Nie Tian, or perhaps he sensed an unusual aura from Nie Tian. However, he only looked at Nie Tian from afar and did not speak. After a moment, Zhu Zia's figure moved, and he directly left. Nie Tian watched Zhu Zia's figure disappear, and his lips curled into a faint smile. He seemed to be thinking about something. Qinya. He was once the most promising swordsman. Many people thought that he had a high chance of becoming the master of the sky. At this moment, Ing Sangqiu came to Nie Tian's side and looked at the place where Zhu Zia's figure disappeared. He sighed and then looked at Nie Tian with a bitter smile. It's a pity that you beat me to it. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, but he did not deny it. Zhu Zia's figure disappeared, and the crowd also dispersed. Nie Tian and the others once again returned to the Universal Palace. Nie Tian sat on the chair and frowned. He felt that Ing Changfeng did not look for him for such a long time because Zhu Zia was in seclusion. Perhaps Ing Changfeng was waiting for Zhu Zia to finish his seclusion. While Nie Tian was lost in his thoughts, a figure appeared outside the Universe Sword Palace and called out, "Sect Master of the Vast Heaven Sect, the Sect Master wants to see you." So fast. When Nie Tian heard this voice, his gaze involuntarily darkened, and his expression instantly changed. Zhu Zia just came out of seclusion, and Ing Changfeng sent someone to look for him. This was clearly not a coincidence. His guess was right. Ing Changfeng was waiting for Zhu Zia to come out of seclusion. Nie Tian. Ing Sangqiu stood up at this moment and had the same puzzlement on his face. "Let's go." Nie Tian smiled faintly with a calm look. He was waiting for Ing Changfeng to look for him. Faintly, he smelled a trace of conspiracy. But he already came here, and it was clearly impossible to retreat. He could only keep walking. Nie Tian was worried about Duanmu Lu and the rest. He let them enter the 9 extremes before heading to the Universal Palace. After a moment, they arrived outside the Universal Palace. At this moment, on the huge plaza outside the Universal Palace, 2 humongous sword shadows stood upright like 2 giants, constantly releasing horrifying sword-intent aura. Nie Tian looked at those 2 sword shadows, and his gaze involuntarily focused. In these 2 sword shadows, he sensed an intense array aura. Without a doubt, these 2 sword shadows should be a sword array. Chapter 36:25. Cosmos Sword, Cosmos Sword? Nie Tian was stunned when he heard Ing Tsang Qiong's words. His eyes froze. Universe Sword. It's really the universe in the sword. Sect Master has actually activated the universe in the sword again. At this moment, when the others saw the 2 sword shadows, their eyes trembled violently, and they cried out in surprise. It was as if they had seen a scene that shocked and terrified them. They did not expect Ing Chongfeng to actually activate the universe in the sword. What is the Cosmos Sword? Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and he could not help but ask Ing Tsangqiong. It's a powerful sword formation. Ing Tsangqiong's face was dark. After saying that, he did not continue. Nie Tian's face was filled with astonishment. He could also tell that the 2 sword shadows were a sword formation. But most importantly, what was this sword formation used for? At this time, everyone looked at the universe and the sword and began to discuss. The universe and the sword is open again. I wonder who will enter this time? Within the Qian sword and the Kuan sword, they possess the strongest sword wills. As long as one could enter them, they would be able to absorb the sword wills. For Sword Master, this is an extremely great benefit. The clash of the cosmos will result in an intense suppression between the 2 sides, and it is even possible for them to devour each other. This is an extremely dangerous matter. Qinya and Zhu Zia have just come out of seclusion. Could it be that Sect Master opened the universe in the sword at this time for him? If Zhu Zia were to enter the Qian sword or the Kuan sword, I'm afraid that only Ying Longxiao would have a chance to fight against him in the entire Qinkuan sect. If it were any other opponent, they would simply be courting death. As the crowd discussed, they looked at the universe and the sword with fervent gazes. People were very curious as to who would enter the sword universe this time. When Nie Tian heard everyone's words, his expression changed. He heard most of it, but he didn't fully understand. He could only tell that one of the 2 sword shadows was the Qian sword and the other was the Kuan sword. Later on, the Qian sword and the Kuan sword would both enter the swordsman realm. Moreover, there was an intense confrontation between the 2 sword shadows. It was as if the confrontation between the universe was an extremely dangerous thing, able to mutually devour each other. Nie Tian, I hope that the universe and the sword isn't open for you. At this moment, Ing Tsangqiong looked at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice. Nie Tian frowned. He did not understand why Ing Tsangqiong would say that. A moment later, Ing Chongfeng's figure appeared with 2 young figures standing behind him. Nie Tian looked at the 2 and recognized them at a glance. They were the 2 Qinkuan swordsmen, Zhu Zia and Ying Longxiao. Zhu Zia's figure was thin and his eyes were sharp. His entire body exuded a sharp aura. Ying Longxiao was tall and sturdy like a pagoda. His face was gloomy, and there was a hint of viciousness in his forcefulness. In the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He suddenly realized that Ying Longxiao's sword principle had reached the 7th heaven of the Oracle realm. How is this possible? Nie Tian couldn't help but be surprised. When he fought with Ying Longxiao half a month ago, the latter was only at the 5th level of the Oracle realm. In just half a month's time, his sword principle had improved by 2 levels. This speed was too fast. Could it be that the master has been letting Ying Longxiao cultivate in the Universal Palace for the past half a month? Ing Tsangqiong, who was at the side, also noticed that something was wrong and could not help but wonder. Nie Tian frowned. He felt that what Ing Tsangqiong said was very likely. When he left the Universal Palace, Ying Changfeng left Ying Longshao alone. It should be to letting Longshao cultivate in the Universal Palace. However, Nie Tian did not expect the Universal Palace to be so terrifying. In just half a month's time, it allowed Ying Longshao to improve so much. At this moment, Ying Sangqiong suddenly let out a sigh of relief and said lightly, "It seems that the universe and the sword is prepared for Zhu Zia and Ying Longshao." But in the next moment, his face darkened, and he said, "Isn't it a little too cruel for the master to let Zhu Zia and Ying Longshao fight?" Cruel? Nie Tian was stunned and could not help but frown. He did not quite understand what Ying Sangqiong meant. Although the universe in the sword is called a sword formation, it actually uses the sword formation as a battle platform for two swordsmen to fight. Ying Sangqiong's face darkened as he said, "The two swordsmen will enter the Qian sword and the Kuan sword respectively and use their own sword intent to activate the sword formation's power to fight." And then, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He did not hear anything cruel about the fight. The Qian sword and the Kuan sword will fight against each other. Qian is heaven and Kuan is earth. Heaven and earth are opposites, and only one can survive. Ying Sangqiong's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "After the two swordsmen enter the sword formation, they will merge with the Qian sword and the Kuan sword. During the fight, the sword formation will devour each other. In other words, in the end, only one of the Qian sword and the Kuan sword can survive. The sword intent of the one who loses will be devoured by the other. There's even a possibility that their sword principle cultivation will be completely destroyed." When Nie Tian heard what Ying Sangqiong said, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed. The battle between the two swordsmen was so cruel. The sword intent of the one who lost would be devoured. It turned out that the sword formation was used to allow the swordsmen to devour each other. This kind of fight seemed great, but in reality, it was much crueler than a normal fight. A swordsman's sword intent would be devoured, and his sword principle cultivation would be completely destroyed. Could there be a heavier blow than this? The duel between the Cosmo sword is very cruel, but for the winner of the duel, it is very beneficial. Ying Sangqiong explained. The winner will use the power of the sword formation to devour the opponent's sword intent. Not only will he improve his cultivation, but his sword principle talent will also be improved. So that's how it is. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He did not expect the universe of a universe in the sword to be so huge. The seemingly ordinary sword formation was actually extremely dangerous. I did not expect the leader to let two universe swordsmen fight against each other. Ying Sangqiong glanced at Zhu Zia and Ying Longshao with a terrible expression. Zhu Zia and Ying Longshao were the most talented swordsmen among the younger generation of the Qian Kuan sect. One of them would definitely be injured in the battle. To the Qian Kuan sect, there was no benefit at all. That might not be the case. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's lips twitched, and he said with a bitter smile, "What might not be the case?" Ying Sangqiong was stunned, as he did not know what Nie Tian meant. It might not be Zhu Zia and Ying Longshao who will fight against each other. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he said. He did not believe that Ying Changfeng sent someone to call him over just to let him watch the battle between the two universe swordsmen. Ying Changfeng was definitely not simple.